I was staring at my computer screen when she walked into our condo. She'd been coming home late from her job for months, and tonight was no different. It was nearly 9 p.m. The kids and I had already had dinner and finished our homework. They'd been in bed for about an hour. They didn't even ask about Mom or why she wasn't home. This was a new development, and it made me sad. ID spent the last hour reviewing our finances from the past 3 years. Things had gotten really tight. Our income had taken a significant hit, but my wife didn't seem to notice. She still spent money like we had plenty. I had just finished paying the last of the bills. We might be able to hang on for another couple of months. I had also revised my life plan, thinking maybe ID made a mistake. For the past 3 years, ID been staring at a ticking time bomb, wondering if it would ever explode. Lately, ID been getting lost in my own thoughts more and more often. Finally, with her arms crossed and a familiar look of contempt on her face, she spoke. "John, I want a divorce." I'm not sure what feelings I had at that moment. My spirit was so loaded with doubt and self-loathing that I was almost numb to any new emotions. Actually, it wasn't all that funny, but I still tried to suppress my laughter. My wife of 15 years just told me that it's over between us, that everything we've built together will eventually be torn apart. I hadn't felt this kind of emotion in a long time, and it almost made me smile relief. I looked at her for just a moment, allowing myself to be transported one last time to our happier times. Then I came back to reality. Fine. I was a better programmer than manager, unfortunately. Programmers get promoted to project managers, then to department heads, and finally to senior management. That's how I ended up as a senior product development manager. It was just a fancy title for a salesman. In fact, I was the most qualified for the position at the time. I created our flagship product line almost single-handedly. I nurtured it through its infancy, helped it grow through 6 successive upgrades. I knew our product better than anyone. When clients had questions, I had answers. When our employees had problems, I knew how to solve them. Add in a new haircut and an overpriced suit, and I looked the part. The salary increase and benefits that came with my promotion didn't hurt either. I would say I was mostly happy with my job, but I loved programming and missed it a lot. In my position, I didn't have the opportunity to code. There were simply too many meetings and phone calls to have the luxury of going back to lines of code. I was forced to watch a new batch of young, bright-eyed guys trying to outdo each other with their latest developments. I won't lie, being the boss was worth it, but I always wanted my job responsibilities to be a little different. It was no surprise when I was fired from Austin Tech Innovations. If I were the boss, I would do the exact same thing. My attendance at meetings had been sporadic at best, and too many deadlines had been missed. At that time, I didn't try to get fired, but I didn't really make any attempt to keep my job at Bright Tech. I was depressed for a long time. It took me almost 4 months to get out of my initial depression and try to move on, but this was not crowned with success either. It took me another month to find a way out of the predicament I found myself in, at least one I could live with. I think I would have gone crazy if I didn't have the kids. They had a flawless routine that helped me get my life back on a positive track: breakfast, school, snacks, homework, dinner, and sleep. Breakfast, school, snack, homework, dinner, bed. This was my mantra, and it helped me find my way. I threw myself into my work as a stay-at-home dad. I took over all the housework and taxi duties. The kids sincerely rejoiced at my presence in the house. It made me realize that I have some value. I wasn't completely worthless. If my wife sensed these changes in our family dynamic, she never spoke about it. I'm pretty sure she didn't even notice. I met Isabel Harris at a college party. I almost decided not to go. I joined the fraternity for the doors it would open after college, not to attend parties while I was there. I decided that I would need all the help I could get. My grades were excellent, so it wasn't a concern. However, everything else about me was just average height, weight, appearance, character average. My name, John, was the most popular name in the 1990s, completely average too. To be honest, when I was away from the computer, there was nothing so unique about me. Dates? I had several relationships. Well, not much. I was pretty good at keeping myself company, even in my senior year of college, until I saw Isabel Harris. Isabel was almost as ordinary as I was. I realized that the average woman looks much better. She was a little withdrawn. I watched her for quite some time before I plucked up the courage to speak to her. Our first meeting was short and quiet, but the acquaintance took place. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee and studied in the library together. We talked for almost 2 months before our first real date. From that moment on, the most fantastic time in my life began. 14 years of bliss. Our courtship was short, and our engagement even shorter. Shortly after graduating, we got married and moved into our first apartment in Austin. We took the morning and evening train to and from our first job. We barely made ends meet, but we were together. We had almost everything in common: family stories, dating experiences, common interests, and goals. Where we did not coincide, we merged. If I couldn't do something, Isabel did it. If she had a flaw, it was one of my strengths. I managed our shared finances better. Isabel was better at managing our social and family schedules. We worked together, and our lives began to improve quickly over the next few years. We were both promoted several times. Our group of friends expanded significantly. We were able to save money to buy our first home as well as travel and have fun. Our sex life started out just like our relationship slowly. We'd been holding hands and kissing since our first date. We switched to active petting when we realized we had an exclusive relationship. Our virginity lasted until the night of our engagement. Since then, our passion has grown along with our shared success. Isabel quit her job 6 years later when our son, Adam, was born. A little over a year later, our daughter, Lily, was born. Yes, I know their names were the most popular when they were born. It was kind of a family tradition. We bought a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs with room for a dog. We bought a family sedan and a minivan. In general, our life was going well: 2 children, a pet, a house, and 2 cars. Totally average. I didn't think I could be happier. I was wrong. My promotion to manager happened shortly after Lily's first birthday. It was almost like a reward for the years of being ignored as one of the middle class and not complaining. Like I said, my new salary was unremarkable, and we weren't complaining. I had a flexible schedule and worked from home most days, coming into the office for staff and management meetings. They say money can't buy happiness. I believe this is true. But what you can buy are stylish clothes, better grooming, better medical care, a new home in a better area, and self-confidence. I went from average to slightly above average. My wife went from average, which I thought was beautiful, to slightly above average, which I thought was damn sexy. Our sex life, which I had always considered good, reached a new level. We traveled more and were able to spend time with our children while saving more and more money for retirement. When Lily started elementary school, Isabel decided she wanted to go back to work part-time. She quickly found a job she thought she would enjoy at a startup marketing firm. She went to the office when she took the kids to school. She would end her day when it was time to pick them up. This was the icing on the cake. We didn't need her salary, so we were able to save it. My projection was that by the time the kids graduated from college, we would be able to retire and live very comfortably. I found out that my wife was cheating on me by accident 3 months before our 15th wedding anniversary. It was my birthday, in fact. I found evidence 2 days before my birthday. I just didn't know it. It took me a few weeks to put everything together. I overlooked the fact that my wife wanted to take a more active role in her new job. This meant she would have to work a few more hours a week, and I would have to pick up the kids from school, but it didn't affect my schedule at all, and I was glad about that. After about 3 months, I noticed that she was often distracted. I asked her about it. She replied that she was trying to find herself in the office and was a little stressed. I decided to take on more responsibilities around the house to lighten her load a little. When our passionate sex life began to noticeably decline, we talked about it. She said she was getting older and didn't need as much as she used to. Our sex life picked up steam for a few weeks, but then faded away again. I didn't dare talk about it again for fear of a quarrel. I was almost at my breaking point when I discovered the gift. The weather had cooled considerably, and I was looking for one of my sweaters. I had taken on the duties of a laundress and more than once got confused about which closet my clothes should be put in. I was sorting through sweaters on the shelf of her closet when I saw it behind some old shoeboxes. It was hard not to notice the pink box and white ribbon from the lingerie store were unmistakable. The card addressed to my beloved one excited me. A small war of thoughts flared up in my head for a moment. Should I watch? Should I wait? I decided to take a look. I wasn't sure I could wait until my birthday to surprise my wife after reading the card. Please forgive the packaging. This gift came in. You can unwrap the real gift on your birthday when I wear what's in the box. Love, Isabel. I was excited and nervous at the same time. Over the next 48 hours, I stepped up my game. I made sure to meet her at the door with flowers, give her a foot massage, and cook her favorite dinner. Her reaction was not what I expected. It looked like she was tolerating my affection. On my birthday, I made sure the kids finished their homework early. I didn't want any problems to interfere with my gift. I was a little surprised when Isabel came home late from work. I was even more confused when she asked me what was for dinner, but I was ready to play along. To my surprise, I suggested we go eat pizza. The kids had fun, and we went. I made an arrangement with the waiter, and just before leaving, the waiter serenaded me with happy birthday. I thought I saw surprise in my wife's eyes, but she quickly recovered. "They'll give you your gift later, John," she said, smiling. The road home was stressful for me. I almost had an accident. The 15 minutes while the kids got ready for bed was brutal, but the 15 minutes after that while they fell asleep was excruciating. Luckily, Isabel returned from an emergency trip to the store to buy milk shortly after they fell asleep. When I arrived at the bedroom door, Isabel was not in the room. I sat down on the bed. A few moments later, she emerged from the bathroom wearing a flannel nightgown, no makeup on her face, and her hair in a ponytail. By this point, I was starting to get a little disillusioned with the games. When will I receive my gift? She slid into bed and crawled under the covers. She reached over to turn off the bedroom lamp, but stopped. Oops, I almost forgot. She opened a drawer on her nightstand and pulled out a small square box wrapped in the colorful balloon paper we had used for Adam's last birthday and handed it to me. "Happy birthday, honey," and that was all. She rolled over, turned off the light, and fell asleep. I was too shocked to even open her gift. The next day, my depression began in full force. I replayed the events of the day over and over again in my head and could not understand what I had done that had so clearly ruined our evening. I was completely confused. I remained in despair for almost 3 weeks. This damn gift almost flashed a pink light at me, announcing my failure. I've heard all these cliches: the husband will be the last to know, etc. I have to be honest and say that I was truly in the dark. The idea of her cheating on me was so foreign that I never not once thought it was possible. But that was the first thing that came to my mind when she called home 10 days after my birthday and said that she would be home late. It's James' 30th birthday, and his staff is inviting him to a celebration. I might be late. I don't remember answering her or going to the closet in the bedroom, but I do remember looking at the empty space where my gift once stood for longer than I cared to admit. I thought I might be having a heart attack and for a few moments hoped it was true and that I would die soon. Paul Davis was Isabel's boss, a smarmy, arrogant advertising executive who was several years younger than both Isabel and me. I only met him once, but I remember not liking him very much, mainly because he seemed so insincere when he spoke. Lily brought me to my senses. "Are you okay, Dad?" A few seconds passed before my eyes focused on my daughter, who was hovering over me on the verge of tears. "I'm fine, honey. Dad just ate something his stomach didn't like. He'll be out in a minute. I just need to get myself in order." I did eventually get out of the bathroom, although I don't remember much after that. I remember grabbing my dusty bottle of bourbon. Judging by the headache the next morning, I knew I had had several glasses. I had no idea when Isabel came home. When I found her in the kitchen this morning feeding the kids, she didn't look like anything unusual had happened. She was just going about her normal business, and only the slight shudder that I saw on her face when she sat down to eat killed all the remaining love in me. It was very subtle, but it was there. I would like to write about how I stood up to my cheating wife, but I didn't. I was simply devastated. It was all I could do to move on, and for several weeks I didn't get better. I was like a zombie every day. When I realized that my wife was calmly doing household chores, I felt worse and worse. I thought I had hit rock bottom. It took me the weekend of my 15th wedding anniversary to shake myself up and decide to take action. I probably wouldn't have done anything. I acted like a weakling. I knew it. I wish I could say I was shocked. There is probably some technical psychological terminology for my behavior. If my father were alive, he would simply say that I acted like a weakling. He would be right. It wasn't until my wife announced that she had to go to a work conference that the fog cleared from my thoughts. She wouldn't be around for our anniversary. I don't know why this mattered to me. It was just another level of disrespect, but it hurt mostly because she gave no indication that she even knew about the date. After drinking myself into oblivion on the night of our anniversary, I woke up angry. I'd reached my limit. I called my lawyer and made an appointment. I was going to end this farce. I was sure that my life couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. The Taquino prisoner's attitude with which I walked into the lawyer's office gave way to crushing disbelief. I knew divorce could be difficult. I thought cheating on my wife would work in my favor. Instead, my lawyer punched hole after hole in my case. I had no evidence of cheating. If I had proof, it wouldn't matter. My wife would have the right to divide our property 50-50. I had no evidence that my wife was a bad parent. My best hope would be joint custody. The difference in income also worked in my wife's favor. I would pay spousal support and alimony. Most likely, my wife would get primary custody and the right to remain in the house for the benefit of the kids. My wife was a cheater, and I was a buffoon. I went from depressed to upset. My wife even asked me about it a few weeks later. "You really don't look good, John. Is something bothering you?" "No, darling." At least she pretended to care, and I just wandered through life. Then I was fired. I didn't know it then, but it was the best thing that happened to me. The evening news gave me a glimmer of hope. I watched depressing story after depressing story, and it seemed to fit my mood perfectly. But then this happened. A major employee on the West Coast went bankrupt. Former employees were struggling to get their final paycheck and were worried about their pensions. It seemed to me that some people might be in a worse situation than me. Then the talking head appeared on the screen again with its analysis. The employees will likely win the lawsuit against their former employer, but it will not make a difference. Nothing's left. All the money's gone. It didn't take me long to connect the dots and come up with a plan of action. My wife couldn't take what wasn't there. We wouldn't have anything, so we wouldn't share anything. Of course, at the same time, I was screwing myself up, but I was still going to lose half of it. Did I really care about the rest? My plan started out simple enough. I was unemployed and had no intention of looking for a job. I was going to spend our savings until there was nothing left. I admit it was a crazy idea. I didn't even think it would work, but it was something I could grab onto. 2 years is a long time. I was painfully bored when I was alone, which was almost always. I realized that Isabel truly was the lifeblood of our friend group. When she distanced herself from me, I discovered that I didn't have any truly strong friendships. I was an only child. Both my parents died young. My dad from a heart attack, my mom from cancer. I was really alone. For 3 years, my kids were the only thing that was right in my life. I enrolled in an executive MBA program. The university was expensive but local. In one go, I spent almost $22,000. I paid cash for a new luxury SUV 70,000. I fully funded my kids' education savings accounts. This cost another $350,000. I spent thousands on a new wardrobe and began withdrawing more and more cash twice a week. I took the kids to school, went to the bank, and drove to the lake shore. I never gambled with the money I took with me, a few bucks here and there to keep myself entertained. I spent enough to show that I spent the day at the casino, including receipts for lunch, snacks, and parking. The main amount went into a wall safe in our garage, me personal post-divorce war chest in case things went south. My other expensive purchase, complete private surveillance of my wife and her lover. I asked for everything I needed: videos, photographs, a daily diary of events. I'm embarrassed to say how much it cost me. You're probably wondering if my wife noticed any of my spending. I'd say yes, except for the gambling part. I had to tell her about transferring money to the kids because I needed her signature on the Guardian accounts. She saw my car and clothes. She never said anything about them. I'm sure she thought I was working and that we were still living on Easy Street. She also made a few purchases, but I didn't say a word. I've often wondered who benefits from her increased lingerie purchases. It's just that we never discussed this topic. We were cordial with each other and communicated daily. It was like putting up with a roommate we didn't particularly like. Sex? Don't even go there. Time spent with the kids was the highlight of my life. I did my best to support whatever interests they had. We did homework and played games together. We went to parks, rode bikes, and went to the movies. Since I took on the role of home, they seemed interested in helping me. I found some simple recipes and let them do it. Isabel was usually around at some point during the week. I didn't exclude her from our family activities, but I didn't make any effort to involve her either. If she was there and wanted to participate, she just did it without saying a word. I received a weekly report about my wife's activities. I thought she was just having Aussie kisses with her boss, but in reality, it was a few guys from her office. A few months later, the company's clients were on its dance map. It was painful, not good. She had already fallen in my eyes. The fact that I now had proof did not move me at all. It wasn't a very interesting sight. In a way, it made me feel better, but not much. It was clear that Paul Davis was not a very skilled lover, although he had the ability to distribute gifts to himself among several different women. This surprised me a little. I assumed, based on her gift, that there was some kind of relationship between him and my wife. But in reality, they were more like sex buddies. It was the same with most of the other 6 men who had fun with my wife. After about a year, it dawned on me that I hadn't had sex since I started my journey. It didn't bother me much. It was just another addition to my wonderful existence. I stopped monitoring after a year. I'd seen enough, and it felt more like a chore to look through the junk they sent me. Despite classes, kids, and gambling, I had a lot of free time. So I decided to focus on my life after marriage, which I assumed would happen someday. I started a new exercise regimen. I've always been in decent shape, nothing special, of course, but during this time, I achieved good results in the bench press and running endurance. I believe that huge muscles and good looks are mostly genetics, and I clearly didn't fit into either of those categories. However, personally, I was very happy with the way I looked. I started researching the latest news about my former industry. I realized that at some point I would need a job. A year away from the madness had left me farther behind than I thought. I spent several hours every day learning the latest technologies and software packages. I took a special interest in my old company, Bright Tech. They seemed to be stagnant. They definitely weren't losing market share. Their revenues were stable, but they weren't gaining traction. In the technology business, if you stand still, you lose. I also spent a significant amount of time studying divorce. I've spent some time devising new devious plans to ruin the life of my hopefully soon-to-be ex-wife. However, most of my time was spent studying how divorce affects kids. I had already gone through most of my pain, and my kids were a big part of that. I wanted to make sure that when the transition came, I would be fully prepared. There is a huge amount of information out there that I thought was complete nonsense. 8 months into my adventure, I started to panic. My wife began to come home at the usual time, and she started talking to me and asking how my day was. Of course, I answered abruptly, but that didn't bother her. She began to dress more provocatively for bed. It seemed like she was trying to rekindle the intimacy of our old life. A few weeks later, things got even worse. For a year and a half, she did not take part in our lives and minded her own business. Now she complained about the lack of communication. She started talking about working on our marriage, and I stopped talking to her. Complete silence. Her attempts at reconciliation continued until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining table. The wrapping paper must have looked familiar since I used it from the last gift she gave me. The contents shouldn't have been a surprise either. It took me 6 months to open the last birthday gift I received from my wife. It was a watch with a cheap digital dial. When I spotted my birthday gift in the impulse buy section of our neighborhood convenience store, I was very angry. A 15 watch from a fast trade store. The best. Then I saw that they had a suitable women's model. I've come to terms with this. I bought them and waited 20 months to give them to her. I wish I could have seen her reaction, but alas, I wasn't there when she opened it. The kids and I had a movie night and got home quite late. The next day, she left before the kids and I even got up. Suddenly, everything returned to normal. Isabel began to stay at the office later and later. We hardly spoke when she was at home, and now finally it happened. John, I want a divorce. I hoped she would get it over with quickly, but almost a week passed before I was given her statement. It was almost laughable: spousal and child support, unequal distribution of assets in her favor, mental and emotional cruelty listed as relevant factors. I decided to give her until next Monday and took the kids camping. I didn't want them around because I would release the hounds. We returned 6 days later, rested and refreshed. Isabel was waiting for us at home. She was sitting alone in the living room. I think she might have the stomach flu. In any case, she didn't look well. I was wondering which part was the biggest surprise for me. I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I asked for the house, the only real property we had left, and full custody of the kids. I asked for spousal and child support because I was unemployed and had been taking care of the kids full-time for 3 years. I filed alienation of affection lawsuits against 7 of Isabel's sexual partners. I had no illusions that I would win any of them, but the law in Texas allowed it, so I returned armed. I filed civil lawsuits against her employer and the companies of 3 clients who took advantage of my wife. Again, I didn't think I could win, but bad publicity might work in my favor. Finally, I sent Isabel's greatest hits DVD to her parents and best friend, so she knew I wouldn't be afraid to use it. She must have known about the evidence I had against her. All this was stated in my counterclaim, but I did not want to take any risks. The kids had a snack and went to their rooms to get ready for bed. They didn't pay attention to their mother. She made no move to address them. I went to the refrigerator to get a beer. Then I walked into the living room and sat down in the chair opposite Isabel. She didn't look at me for a long time, so I just enjoyed my beer. Besides the fact that she felt bad, she seemed to be crying about something. Maybe she was injured. She finally spoke, but it was almost a whisper. "You will destroy me." I waited for her to look up so I could follow her gaze as I answered. It took a few seconds. God, I hope so. I thought this moment would be more intense. When a single tear formed in her eye and then rolled down her cheek, I felt nothing. "Do you hate me that much?" "Oh no, Isabel, I don't hate you. Hate takes effort. I can honestly say that I put in absolutely no effort when it comes to you. All my efforts go into taking care of me and my kids. But I'm your wife. Stop. I won't let a piece of trash like you ruin my wife's good name. My wife was a loving and caring woman, my best friend, partner, and mother to my kids. She is dead. You are the trash who has taken over her body. Don't talk like you have anything to do with me." It took a long time before she spoke again. "What should I do now? Is this a rhetorical question, or do you really want to hear my answer?" I didn't let her answer before continuing. "I believe there are several possible solutions to your problem. You can go far, far away and try to start a new life. I would choose this option. I will never allow my kids to spend any meaningful time with you, so this should not influence your decision to leave. Or I guess you could try staying here, hanging around the city, trying to control myself. But who knows who will hear about your little exploits, or who will want to hire someone like you. Maybe you can settle down with some loser who doesn't care what you are like, but what kind of nonentity will this be? Or you can commit suicide. I really hope you don't choose this option. This will prevent me from watching you suffer, but then again, I'm not sure my opinion really matters to you. It definitely didn't matter when you decided to cheat on me with your boss. I'd been dreaming about giving this little speech for months. I should have been glad to be able to say it. As I watched what was left of her spirit crumble word by word, I hoped that I would get some kind of satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. Life after the divorce was mixed with the lawsuits. I was doing much better than I had hoped. I received just over $1 million in settlements from 3 companies whose employees slept with my wife. It was surprising because my lawyer told me not to expect much. During the after-game analysis, we decided that after seeing how he handled my ex-wife's company, they didn't want any of the negative publicity. We destroyed my ex-wife's company through discovery motions, depositions, and leaks to the press. I also started my own stealth campaign, emailing the CEOs of their remaining clients with information about my wife, her boss, and their buddies. It took time, but gradually their income dried up. Employees who didn't want to be associated with the scandal quit. Eventually, they filed for bankruptcy. Paul Davis was fired and left town in disgrace. The $220,000 check I received was smaller than my other victories, but much nicer. I received nothing from my alienation of affection claims. I never thought I would get it. For wives nevertheless brought their husbands to light in subsequent divorces. It wasn't all champagne and roses. In the process, I also hurt myself. It was not uncommon for me to run into someone familiar with my situation. For a while, the ridicule and teasing got out of control. I don't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate, but I didn't care. I already felt like a failure, so anyone's words didn't touch me. Some of these bastards were actually pretty smart. I was able to protect my kids from most of the collateral damage. This has always been my main concern. They were sad for a while, but soon recovered. The biggest victory was my return to Bright Tech as Vice President of Design and Development. One way to escape from personal troubles was to return to programming. Over the course of 2 dismal years, I was able to develop an add-in to the main Bright Tech software that allowed it to be easily integrated with 2 other popular competitor software packages. I founded my own company and started selling my development. Less than a year later, I received offers from all 3 companies to buy my company and my software. I received $12 million for my company and an incredible compensation package from Bright Tech. I had been considering retirement for some time, but with no social life at all, I was convinced that if I didn't give myself a reason to get out of the house every day, I would become a recluse. My new income allowed me to hire a sweet little old lady who worked part-time as a housekeeper and nanny for the kids. A year later, Mrs. Margaret Jennings moved in full-time, living in the apartment above the garage of our new home. She was like a grandmother to my kids, mostly sweet and kind but strict when necessary. What I valued most was the advice she could give to kids, the advice that only comes with experience. I loved my kids and did my best to be a caring and attentive father, but I was also damaged, scarred, and cruel. I also turned to her for advice. She was my rock when it came time to make decisions. The kids grew into well-adjusted adults, and I saw them and their families from time to time. Unfortunately, over time, our closeness weakened. I was in no way offended by them. It was better to keep me at a distance so that my bitterness would not infect their lives. Mrs. Thompson worked for me until the kids left for college. Then she retired. I offered her free room and board as a pension. She was a constant presence in my life for 15 years. She tried her best to get me to live again and find someone to share my life with. I appreciated her efforts, but in the end, she died knowing that I would always be alone. I never really opened up to anyone again. My friendships were superficial and unfulfilling. I've never been on a date except for a few group dinners organized by casual friends. I have a well-deserved reputation for being an ice-hearted, merciless person who cannot be contradicted. For the most part, I was avoided, and I blame no one but myself for it. My sexual needs were regulated quite well. My ever-growing wealth allowed me to maintain a constant rotation of call girls. I paid generously for their time and the use of their bodies. Basically, I just had sex with them and sent them out the door. I really liked one of them. Her name was Lucy. I later found out that it was, in fact, Jessica. She was a passionate and willing partner. I think I was more than a client to her too, but I could never burden anyone else with my demons. So when I felt she was getting too attached to me, I let her go. If you're wondering what happened to Isabel, she had a hard life. She tried to talk to me for almost a year. I don't know exactly why she tried. Did she think we could reconcile, or did she hope for a relationship with my kids? Maybe. I honestly warned her, but she didn't listen. She tried to stay in Austin, and I started following her. When she applied for a job, I made sure her work record was always there to greet her. When she started dating, which happened almost immediately, I sent her potential partners packages with wishes so that they knew everything about the woman they were letting into their lives. I didn't care if they wanted to keep her around after they found out the truth, but I didn't want her to be able to reshape history by ignoring it. I had to live with this every day, so it was only fair that she did too. As I said, my ex-wife continued a constant campaign of unanswered phone calls, emails that I never read or responded to, and always kept my email inbox full. I think some sick part of me wanted her to suffer. I believe that at the very beginning, it would be appropriate to seek professional help. Perhaps it would save part of my soul and allow me to return to a normal life. But in the end, I never went, and as time passed, it seemed too late to do anything. I could have changed my phone number, but I didn't. An assistant could sort my mail, but I always did it myself. I could block her incoming emails. This would prevent me from accidentally opening one of them. It was a stream of apologies that meant nothing. Of course, the situation got out of control. Of course, she always loved me. Hasn't she suffered enough? I responded with a gift and a simple note. I bought the trashiest lingerie I could find at her favorite store and wrapped it neatly in a clean white ribbon that really brought out the pink color of the box. I attached a beautiful handwritten note. I'm sure she appreciated the symmetry when she opened the card addressed to the trashy one. One of her potential suitors tried to bring me to justice for tormenting my ex-wife. He showed up on my doorstep, full of liquid courage, pushing me back and knocking me over as I opened the front door. It was his mistake. Like I said, I'm nothing special. I didn't do any martial arts or special forces training. I was an ordinary guy. I've never been a violent person, hell. I've never even been in a fight. But what I had was rage-diluted, unspent hatred for my wife and her lovers. He was the unfortunate recipient of my exit. In the end, I escaped with a good burn and a broken rib. He was lucky to be alive. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and trespassing and received probation as a first-time offender. I think the years of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation made a greater impression on him. Isabel never tried to contact me again. I stopped following her after another year when she found a full-time job cleaning rooms at a travel hotel in a town about 700 miles away in rural Arizona. The only time I saw her was 12 years later at my daughter's wedding. I know the kids reconnected with Isabel a few years after graduating from college. I made no attempt to stop them from finding her. The years have not been kind to her. She had gained at least 35 pounds and had deep wrinkles around her lips and other signs of smoking. This was a new trend. Overall, she looked old and haggard. But underneath it all, I still saw the woman I gave my heart to. I didn't feel anything for her, but I saw her. She sat alone in the bridal section near the back of the church. Her interactions with my daughter were brief, cordial, but distant. She never tried to talk to me. For the rest of the evening, we did not come closer than 30 feet to each other. She stood on the street and waited for a taxi. When I saw it on her finger, I smiled for the first time in a long time. She may have done a better job than I did. Judging by the small gold ring and minuscule diamond on her left ring finger, I walked up to her and looked at him for a few moments. When I raised my eyes to meet her gaze, there was deep sadness in her eyes. For the record, you ruined my life first. I looked down at her left hand, then back into her eyes. I'm glad you found someone. I hope he makes you happy. I quickly walked to my car. My driver waited. Good evening, Mr. Stevens. Hope you had a pleasant evening, sir. Are we going to the club? It went as well as I could have hoped, Michael. Let's go straight back to the house. I think tonight I'd like to be alone. Of course, sir. As we drove away, I tried my best not to look back, but I caught a short wave of her hand. I spent the rest of that night in a strange state of melancholy. Seeing Isabel after so many years brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. I knew deep down that our relationship had been destroyed beyond repair, but some part of me still grieved for the woman I once loved. The next morning, I decided to focus on my future. The kids were grown and starting their own families. It was time for me to find some semblance of peace in my life. I began by cleaning out the garage, where I found the old wall safe with the money ID hidden years ago. It was a reminder of my past self, a man who was broken and vengeful. I decided to donate a significant portion of it to a local charity that helped victims of domestic abuse. Maybe in some way, it would help me atone for the pain I had caused. As the months went by, I threw myself into work. BrightTech was thriving under my leadership, and I found satisfaction in my professional accomplishments. I also started volunteering at the local community center, teaching coding classes to underprivileged kids. It was rewarding to see their eyes light up when they learned something new, and it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Despite my busy schedule, loneliness crept in from time to time. Mrs. Thompson had been right. I needed to find someone to share my life with. But after everything I'd been through, the idea of opening up to someone new was daunting. I'd built walls around my heart, and tearing them down seemed impossible. One evening, as I was locking up the community center, a woman approached me. She was in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Julia," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard great things about your coding classes. My son is in one of them." I shook her hand, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. "Nice to meet you, Julia. Your son is a quick learner. He's got a bright future ahead of him." We talked for a while, and I found myself enjoying the conversation more than I expected. Over the next few weeks, we ran into each other often at the community center. Julia was a single mom, recently divorced, and we bonded over our shared experiences. She was patient and understanding, qualities I hadn't encountered in a long time. Eventually, I asked her out for coffee. It felt like a big step, but Julia's presence was comforting. Our first date was simple, just two people getting to know each other. There was no pressure, no rush, just an honest connection. As we spent more time together, I realized that Julia was different. She wasn't trying to fill a void or fix me, she simply accepted me for who I was. It was refreshing and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. One evening, as we walked along the lakeshore, Julia turned to me. "John, I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to push you, but I need to know if you see a future for us." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "Julia, you've brought light into my life when I thought it was impossible. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to find out with you." She smiled, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope. We continued to see each other, slowly building a relationship based on trust and respect. It wasn't always easy. My past still haunted me, but Julia's presence made the journey worthwhile. I learned to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me. I forgave Isabel, not for her sake but for mine. Holding on to the anger only kept me chained to the past. Julia taught me that it was okay to move forward, to find happiness again. Years later, as I watched my grandchildren play in the yard, I realized that life had given me a second chance. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life filled with love and purpose. And for that, I was grateful. Thanks for watching this intense story of betrayal, redemption, and starting over. How do you think you would handle a situation like this? Leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories. See you next time.
My name is Tom, and I come from a broken family. I was raised by a domineering mother and her flying monkey sisters. Rachel was the oldest and 15 years my senior. Lisa was 12 years older. I guess I was a mistake and not planned, and they all blamed my birth for the separation of my parents. My dad left home in 1982 when I was 6 and never returned. Throughout my childhood, I was bullied both at school and inside the safety of my home. I just wanted my mother to love me, just a pat on the back and tell me that I am here, that I am part of the family. It never happened. I was good at studies, and after trying for 14 years of my life, I dedicated myself to my education. Years passed, and in 1995 I found myself at Westfield University in North London. I was more than happy to be away from my house. Here I met Laura, and even now I can picture her from back then. She was beautiful and so confident. On the other hand, I was shy and introverted. She was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was finishing my Master VJTMMs in mechanical engineering and design. Like I said, I was way too shy to approach her, and she was never short of attention from men. She was 5 to 6 inches with blonde hair and big green eyes, the type you could get lost in. She had a nice body, but I knew she was out of my league. The guys who chased her were all outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of her friends got talking to me at a party, and Laura came over and joined us. I had little experience with women, and I think being humble and bashful made me attractive to her. I managed to build up the courage to ask her out, and we began dating. I'm not ashamed to say that she took my virginity, but after around 8 months of dating, I heard a rumor that she had been screwing around with other guys. I had no way to prove it and was afraid to confront her. Laura was a spoiled child. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Jessica. Most of our relationship, I had to put up with her acting like a princess. If she did not get her way, she would create a fuss, and she wouldn't hesitate in creating problems in public, which just caused me embarrassment. My friends couldn't VDJ Emmett stand her and thought I should get rid of her. But I fell in love, and I had never really experienced that before. When we graduated, we both found jobs and managed to find a flat outside of Nottingham. Her family was from there, and I had long since stopped having anything to do with mine. We were married a year later, and the following year we welcomed Emily to the world, shortly followed by Olivia a couple of years later. Laura loved being a mother, and everything between us seemed great from then on. I got promoted a few times, and then 12 years ago I started working for Anderson Engineering. The increased salary and bonuses helped us to save for a better house. But like most people in the world, 2009 was a bad year. The economic downturn meant that many people lost their jobs. Contracts were harder to win, so we all had to up our game and work longer hours for no extra money. It was at this time, when both the girls were full-time at school, that I realized Laura was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that by the time it ended, I was none the wiser about who he was. My best friend Jake thought it was a guy in her class who had moved nearby. I confronted her once about it, and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid. But I could tell she was lying. The fact that I was able to keep my job and the good salary meant I was in a great position to buy a nice house. Laura was always on at me to own a house that befitted our status, whatever that meant. But I conceded, as I always did, and we managed to buy a beautiful detached 4-bed house in Nottingham. It was a buyer VJTM's market at the time, so we got a good price, even though the mortgage was a little steep. One thing I did do that was out of character was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my end-of-year bonus in it, and with me being the sole breadwinner and the one responsible for all the finances and banking, I don't think Laura would have known about it even if I waved the receipts under her nose. In retrospect, this turned out to be one of the best things I could have done. I needed some protection because I was not sure if Laura planned on dumping me if the old lover ever returned. After the time, everything seemed to go back to a semblance of normality, and the girls were always a top priority for me. I encouraged them in education and made sure I spent plenty of time with them on weekends. In fact, it was me who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo on more occasions than I can remember. Laura always seemed too busy on her coffee outings with her other spoiled and lazy friends. I rarely socialized with the other husbands, but we seemed to be henpecked and under the thumb to varying degrees. My friends used to sing "Under My Thumb" by the Rolling Stones to me when I had to cancel plans in favor of whatever Laura wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the factory floor would make comments about my marital situation, especially Laura VDGKM's control over me. It was only a few months ago that it all came to a head. Olivia had just left for university, and for the first time in 19 years, Laura and I were alone. Both the girls were attending our old alma mater, and as I finished unpacking Olivia VDGTM's belongings into the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. I was gobsmacked, as she was always such a quiet girl like her old dad. "I heard Chef DDGTM's screwing around with Ben from your company," she said. I can remember the tears in her eyes even now as she spoke. It was news to me, but I was not surprised. All these years I could have investigated her affairs, and never did, for fear of breaking up the family and my girls suffering for it, and resenting me like my sisters did my dad. I allowed her to cuckold me because the alternative did not bear thinking about. I still loved her, but I loved what we had created even more. This news did a number of things to me. Firstly, I realized for the first time the level of animosity felt by my girls towards their mother was far greater than I could ever have imagined. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed I hadn't taken a tougher stance with Laura. Secondly, it brought up old feelings I felt towards the women in my life whilst growing up and how that contributed to my weaknesses. Finally, I realized at work I was being talked about and laughed at openly by the staff, and most noticeably by Ben, who just happened to be the nephew of the owner and the man cuckolding me. I did not know what to do, but I knew I couldn't go on allowing this, especially now my youngest daughter was aware of the ridicule I was receiving at the hands of Laura. I knew I had to confront her. My heart was racing as I was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for Laura to return home. When she finally appeared, I found I was unable to speak. Again, she just looked at me in a way I can only describe as apathy and with contempt. She said nothing to me as she emptied her bags into the cupboards. Finally, I spoke. "Are you having an affair, Laura?" She turned to face me, slightly blushing, but with no hesitation she replied, "I wouldn't Call it an affair, darling." I was shocked and sickened by her admission, and yet waited silently in anticipation of her explanation of how screwing another man was not classed as an affair. "You are a wonderful man, Tom. You're a great provider, and you VJ are my best friend, but there are things you can TMT provide me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want it all," she said bluntly and openly. "So that means you've are cheating on me," I said, dismayed by her brazen approach to infidelity. "Only my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind, Tom. That belongs to you." My head was spinning, and my stomach was in knots. The sheer, unabashed cheek of what she was saying left me speechless. "I never deny you sex, Tom, and all I'm doing is exploring with a couple of younger guys," she admitted. "What?" I screamed. I never raised my voice, and my reaction took her back. She walked around the table and took a seat opposite me. "Don't shout at me, Tom," she said, regaining her composure. "You admit to cheating on me with two guys, and IVDJTM supposed to be quiet?" I replied. "I love you, Tom, but this is how things are going to be. Live with it, or IVJTM I'll leave and be with him anyway," she said, issuing me both a threat and an ultimatum. I just sat looking at her. When her face softened, I thought for a minute she had seen the hurt in my face. "Everyone does it these days, Tom. My friends have had flings with younger men, and they say it makes the marriage better," she said. I was in shock. I was struggling to absorb it all before, but now Laura was actually trying to justify her adultery by telling me all her friends were cheats too. As for the notion that it would make our marriage better, that was contemptuous at best. She did not care for the marriage or me, only the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke again. "So I can have another woman? Is that what you're saying, Laura?" She looked at me for a few seconds and then laughed in my face. I sat in silence as she continued to laugh before trying to control herself. "You're right, Tom. Come on, be serious. You struggle to speak to women you have known for years. What chance are you going to have to chat someone else up?" She was openly mocking me, continuing to giggle, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed, but she refused to let up. "This is how it's going to be, Tom, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife. I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Do not mess up your life by complaining about it or doing something you'll regret." She left me at the table, contemplating what had just happened to my life, to my world. She was so open about her activities that I realized she did not care for me one little bit. I did not care if her friends were all cheating, but that did not give her the right to be one. Not only that, but she actually had the audacity to threaten me. I was angry, very angry. That night I slept in the spare room. I couldn't face being anywhere near her, but around midnight Laura woke me up and asked why I wasn't coming to bed. Was she really this deluded? I knew she was spoiled, but really? "Oh, come on, Tom, get with it. This is the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man," she said. I said nothing. I could sense her presence still on the landing, looking into the spare room. "Oh, suit yourself, Tom. You'll come back to bed soon. I know you deny me nothing, and you know as well as I do I'll get my own way," she said confidently. In reality, she was right. What had I ever done in a 21-year relationship that suggested anything other than my unbridled loyalty and willingness to go along with everything she said and wanted? It was public knowledge that I was under her thumb and henpecked, and now it was well known amongst her friends and my work colleagues that I was a cuckold too. Next morning I went to my office. I took just a few steps in and was greeted by Ben, the man my wife was screwing. He smiled at me and asked, "How's your wife, Tom? Hope she is good?" The smug look on his face, as though he was about to burst into laughter at any minute, just made my blood boil. I just looked at him and said nothing. I heard a few giggles by the coffee machine from grown men. I just looked at them as they stood their ground. I made my way past them as they continued to chuckle at my expense. I felt like the whole world knew my business, and even the boss's secretary, Jane, seemed to find my situation laughable and open to mockery. I walked into my office and sat at my desk. My day had started off in the worst possible way, And now I was a laughingstock at work as well as at home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger within me refused to abate. I decided to start looking into my father. All I knew was that he was born in Yorkshire and left us at the age of 37 in 1982. So I searched for family history sites in that area. Within a few minutes, I discovered that there were 14 people named David Miller in Yorkshire who were born in 1945. I knew he might have died years before I went to university, so I was able to narrow it down to 3 possible people. I decided I did not have the time to go searching for each one, so I placed a message on genealogy websites in each of the towns I had found. As I sat in my office thinking about the last 24 hours, I was called by my boss, Mr. Anderson. He wanted to speak to me in his office. Now, Mr. Anderson was a successful and wealthy man, but at 60, he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and a bully. He is one of those power-mad types who commands respect but gives none in return. Many times in the past I had thought about quitting, but he always convinced me to stay, and the money was the best in this area. One thing I didn't know about him was that he was screwing his secretary, Jane, behind his 3rd wife's back. "Now, I hear these rumors about your wife playing around on you, Tom," he said bluntly. "With your nephew," I snapped back. "Well, yes, he's a cad, that boy. It runs in the family," he said, laughing as I remained silent. "But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first after that, Tom. So if you have a problem, it will be you who will have to leave the company. Is that understood?" He was talking to me like an old school teacher punishing a child. I bit my lip as his eager secretary, Jane, hovered by the door. She was no doubt collecting some information to spread to her friends on the factory floor. As I turned to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would lower herself to the depths of having sex with a dirty old man like Mr. Anderson. As I passed her, I heard snickering again. I put my head down and walked out. As the door closed behind me, I heard the explosive sound of laughter, which was obviously at my expense. As I made my way back to my office, I realized that being here was doing me no good at all. I had paid for my girl's education, and all I was doing now was financing my wife's infidelities. I was a pretty simple guy. I liked my gadgets, but I could live without the big house. The majority of my living costs were Laura's indulgences, weekly hair and nail appointments, her car and phone, plus other unnecessary luxuries. At work, I was normally happy. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who had designed many of the parts being produced and sold here, and I was sure I could find gainful employment elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak, and well, they were right. I wasn't the confrontational type, and I never made waves because I was content. I was good old Tom, the submissive engineer who people could walk all over. I looked at my screensaver of the family on holiday. I rolled the mouse and the page opened to my email. I had a message waiting for me, and it was from a woman named Linda Roberts from the Yorkshire Genealogy Committee. I was taken aback by how fast they had replied. I clicked and read the message. I was blown away. Linda had read my message appealing for information on my dad and had gotten in touch with a woman who claimed to be his niece. Her name was Sarah Johnson, and she was my cousin. I mailed back my number to Linda and asked if Sarah could possibly contact me. I left work with my spirits slightly raised. When I reached home, Laura was cooking dinner, and as I walked in, she smiled and came up to me. I moved away and in a few minutes came back for dinner. "Can we talk about last night, Tom?" she asked meekly. "What's there to talk about? You made yourself perfectly clear last night. I either live with it or else, right?" She looked at me for a few seconds with what looked like regret in her face. It did not last for long as she inhaled deeply, cleared her throat, and continued. "You're a great husband and you've denied me nothing, so please don't deny me this, Tom." She was almost pleading. "If I'm so great, why cheat on me? Why make a fool of me?" I asked honestly. She became flustered and just shrugged me off. She had no answer. She was just selfish, and I was growing tired of it. I couldn't do any more to make her happy. The hours I put in to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, and I get nothing but disrespect and ridicule. I drive a 15-year-old SUV so she can drive one less than 3 years old. Look, Tom, I have needs, and you just cannot fulfill them. So you either deal with it like I know you're going to, or you lose me to a younger man. You mean Ben? You might as well use his name, Laura. Everyone knows he's screwing you, I interjected. Okay, yes, Ben and I are lovers. He is effectively your boss, Tom, and he'll one day take over the company from his uncle, she said bluntly. So he gives me what I need now in bed, and if you do not buck up and accept the arrangement, then I'll leave you, and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I said nothing, as usual. I just got up from my seat and walked into my study. The tears came, and I wished to be anywhere else but here right now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes as the phone began to ring. I picked it up and heard a strange voice on the other end. It was Sarah. We spoke for about an hour, and when I put the phone down, everything else was gone from my mind, and I had a huge smile on my face. Sarah was delighted that I had decided to look into my father and had so much to tell me. I found out that my mom had indeed kicked my father out of the house, so she lied to me all my childhood. He sadly died in 1985 when I was just 9. He had died of alcohol poisoning, and his mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mom for his character and state of mind after he left us. Sarah told me he longed to be back in my life but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet at the weekend at her home in Yorkshire. I was excited, and I knew the break would do me good. The rest of the week dragged on. Things at home were the same, and at work I was being constantly laughed at behind my back. Ben and his pals thought it would be funny to hang a pair of knickers on my office door. I looked at Jane, and she said nothing. Inside the underwear was a post-it note that said, "Please return to your wife." I was broken. I sat at my desk and cried that day too. I wanted to blame everyone except myself. I would be glad when Saturday arrived. I told Laura I was going to see a friend in Leeds, and she didn't really care what I was up to. I guessed she would be screwing around on me, so being away made that easier for her. The drive up to Yorkshire was stressful. I eventually found Sarah's house an hour after I was expected. It did not seem to bother her, as I was greeted with the best hug I had received in years. I was introduced to her husband, Mark, and their 2 young children, Lily and Sam. With the formalities over, we got down to talk about my father and my new family. Sarah had such a warm, selfless personality, and she and Mark talked over each other and finished each other's sentences. I guess they were both eager to share the story of our family. During my time there, we were joined by David and Emma Roberts. He was my cousin also, and brother of Sarah. We got on really well, and he added what he knew about my father and the family. After lunch, we went on a little trip where I was given time to reflect. When we returned, David and I spoke about our jobs and our family life. He could tell things were not good, and for some reason, I confided in both my new cousins. They simply told me not to stand for it and that they would support me if I needed anything. I was so grateful. I left Yorkshire with a new look on things. I had been told so many lies and had been treated so badly throughout my life that knowing I had a whole different family, who, within a day, had shown me more kindness and honesty than most people I had known all my life, gave me hope. I needed to sort my life out and get back to being happy. Not just for me, but for my girls, my friends, and my new family. When I returned home, it was gone 8 p.m. Laura was just getting ready to go out somewhere. "Where are you going, Laura?" I asked. "Out with my friends." "Do you mean Ben or Jack?" I snapped back. She looked at me somewhat taken aback at how I knew the name of her second paramour. I gave her a knowing look. "Please, not all this again, Tom," she begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. "Please, Laura, I'm asking you to stop this and be my wife." "Stop being silly, Tom. I am your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures, and I'll make life easy on you. I'll be back by midnight." She had completely ignored my wishes and continued to threaten me. She walked towards me with her arms open wide, so I turned my back on her. She said nothing of my blatant snub and just collected her designer handbag and headed for the door. "Again, Laura, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this," my voice now getting sterner. She stopped in her tracks and looked at me as though asking herself, "Who is this guy, and who does he think he is talking to me like that?" It lasted only a second again before she burst out laughing. "What are you going to do, Tom? Leave me? You never have the balls to do that. We both know you'll always be here for me." I was crestfallen. I dropped my head as her words reverberated through my head. "For me, no balls. Deny me my pleasures." I always knew she was a spoiled brat. Her parents had seen to that. I knew I treated her like a queen, whereas I was the workhorse. I knew she was selfish, but always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I was a fool, and I knew I had been for way too long. That had to end, and I needed to make plans to make it so. I wasted no time in getting things rolling. In fact, I started while she was out getting screwed by Ben or Jack. Maybe they were doing her together. That is probably what she meant by getting her pleasures, having her cake and eating it. I provide all the safety, security, and material goods, and two young guys get to have her any way they wanted. My thoughts were making me angry, and I was beginning to lose focus. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of affection I had left for her, and I think I found a way. I found the box I was looking for and the specific picture within that box. It was the only one I had of my mom and sisters. I did not think it would work, but I cut a picture I had of Laura's face and pasted it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Laura's smirking face to the picture might just do the trick. I placed it on the desk next to the monitor in my study. At around 12:45 a.m., I was finishing up. I had pretty much worked out what I was going to do in the short term. I had an idea of when I would leave, but it could be a few weeks yet. I had the time because it was not like Laura was expecting me to go. It might not work, and I would definitely require help to pull it off, but I had convinced myself by this time that I would go through with it. I heard someone stumbling through the door, and as I got up to look out of the window, I saw Ben's car pull away. I heard her climb the stairs, so I quickly wiped my history. In the future, I would have to use incognito mode. I waited until she went into our bedroom before going down the stairs to make myself a coffee. I sat on the sofa and pondered my future away from here, and to be honest, without my daughters being here, I knew it wouldn't be too bad. I thought I would try and move closer to them. Monday morning, I walked into work clear that I would not be lifting a finger anymore. Mr. Anderson could sack me for all I care. I walked to my office, oblivious to any of the snickering or comments being made about me. I managed to arrange a meeting with the bank for 1 p.m. and took the time before to work out my finances and preparation. It was going to be a long shot, but if it worked and the right people helped me, then I would come out of this pretty well. The meeting went as planned, and I was able to close out my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. I had an ISA with a few grand in it, so I closed it out for cash and stuffed it in my wallet. On the way back to the office, I stopped at a PC World and purchased 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new PC hard drive. Once back in the office, I sat down and started to see if I could open up the company's private customer files. I had seen them briefly before in Mr. Anderson's office, so I knew they existed. But I needed his password. It took me no more than an hour to crack it. Ironically, his wife's name was the username, and the password was both his name and his 6-digit birthday. Anderson 246459. I had what I needed. I attached the drive to my computer and downloaded all the files to it. 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I had been working on, which would keep this company ahead of the game. We built pumps for air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy sector. I wiped my entire PC history, including all the plans and all my work. I then shut it down and removed the hard drive and replaced it with the new one. I put everything into my bag and then reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day looking up our competitors on my phone. I checked into Monster to look for engineering jobs in the South London area and then left for the day. That night, after another silent dinner, I headed for my study. I found that one of our main competitors, who had struggled during the financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer who could assist in basic design and shop floor management. It wasn't entirely what I wanted, but damn near close. They were offering a salary VJ10, 000 lower than my current salary, so I fired off an email and included my CV. I decided to sleep in our marital bed that night just to keep up appearances with Laura. However, I made sure I was asleep when she walked in. I felt her rub up against me, and I felt sick. As bad as that was, it actually pleased me to react in such a way. I was becoming repulsed by her, and this would help me in the long run. The following day, I received a call from a very surprised-sounding Robert Smith from Harris Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe I would consider quitting Anderson Engineering for his smaller company. He nearly offered me the job on the spot, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He agreed. Another vital cog had been fitted, and the wheels were beginning to turn pretty fast. I had plenty of time on my hands, so I started to research flats in the area. I found one. It was situated 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged for a viewing the next day after the interview with Robert Smith was finished. Next, I spoke to Mr. Anderson and told him I had to go and see my daughters at Westfield the next day to sign some papers. He just brushed me off and said, "Go." That night, I called my best friend Jake. We had known each other since sixth form. We both got into Westfield, but he studied finance and mathematics. He was now a big-time banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife Sarah and children in a nice house in Twickenham. Best of all, he and his wife loathed Laura, which meant we rarely socialized with each other as couples. I arranged to meet Jake the next evening after my interview and flat viewing. He knew I had something playing on my mind, but I told him I would tell all when we met. Before meeting Jake, I met my daughters and told them of the situation. To my surprise, they both were happy and displayed their frustration at their mother's behavior and pledged their faith and support in me. A day later, I met Jake and Sarah. I told them everything that had been going on and the first part of my plans. They were more surprised that I was fighting back than by Laura's infidelity. To them, that was pretty much par for the course in their eyes. "So why leave her now, Tom?" Sarah asked, handing me another cup of tea. I told them all about the meeting with my cousins and the truth about my dad being kicked out of the house by my mom and how my sisters took her side. My dad was just like me, or shall I say I was like him, but this time my girls are on my side. "So it was that discovery that triggered you into finally standing up for yourself?" Jake asked, concern etched on his face. "No, I was taken to my father's grave. I was hesitant at first, but I managed to lay some flowers and say a few words. It was then I looked at the etching on the stone that left me shocked. It was then I knew I had to leave," I explained. "What was it, Tom?" they said in unison. It had an image of a rose, and below that it said, "In loving memory." It had the date of his birth, and below that it said the age he was when he died. There was a period of silence before I spoke again. He died at the age of 42, the age I am now. Both Jake and Sarah recoiled slightly at this news, and I knew that they understood. There have been times when I could have reached for the drink like he did or done myself in, like my grandmother believed he did. I had a choice: be like him or fight back. I decided I wasn't going to kill myself trying to be the perfect husband anymore and being abused and ridiculed in the process. I felt weaker at that point than I had in weeks. Admitting to my friends how low I had been was harder than I imagined. Jake shook me out of my mood. "What do you need from us, Tom?" "Please say no if it's too much, but I have a plan to protect myself and screw her over," Sarah interjected. I smiled and nodded. I guess Sarah did have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2009, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and any spare cash into it. It was also with a stroke of luck that the only way we could get a mortgage for the amount we needed was if I applied in my name only. Laura had no real work history, so it was just easier for me to apply alone. I knew if anyone was capable of following my train of thought, it would be Jake. I asked Jake to transfer the ownership of my house to a new company that he would create. I would pay off the mortgage. All I needed to do was contact the land registry and transfer the deeds into his company. Jake was skeptical. I told him that Laura would have no money to fight the case, and her parents would not support her if they found out that she was sleeping around. They are religious and value their ethics more than their daughter. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage and stated that I could pay later. On my way home, I went to the local Land Rover dealership. I knew the guy because it was where I purchased Laura's Range Rover Sport about 11 months ago. I was still paying for it. In fact, I had an idea of how to get some more money. I told him that I wanted to exchange Laura's car for the latest model. We came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back, and we would cancel our payment plan. I promised to return to upgrade my car, and he knew he could make up the cost of Laura's car by selling it as practically brand new. I apologized for any inconvenience, but the thought of selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made it up to him. On the way out, I took a 2017 brochure, not for me, but for Laura. When I got home, Laura was sitting in the lounge, nursing a coffee and looking a bit pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag down onto the floor. I had to now work on the second part of the plan. I told Laura that I still loved her and I wanted my wife to have the best of everything, so I'm going to trade her car in and buy her this, I said, pointing to a new 2018 model inside the brochure. "Oh, wow, I love it," she said, oblivious to my plan. "You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Tom?" "The only problem is that they have a buyer for your car already, so I need to get it down there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and take it to the dealership, and then for the weekend, you can just use mine to go visit your lovers." The final comment made her recoil, and a look of shock and confusion filled her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing, Tom. I just thought you were still angry about our arrangement," she asked. "Not our arrangement, Laura. Your arrangement. I had no say in it, remember, but I guess I have no choice, right?" I said, hoping to get a response. She just nodded as though she had finally put me in my place and I had conceded defeat. "I love you, Tom." I turned to look at her, and a genuine look of concern greeted me. I said nothing in reply and just walked off into the kitchen. My phone began to ring, and I walked out to the back garden to take it. Jake confirmed the money had been transferred. I was good to go. The next day, I wasted no time as I entered the bank and was shown into the mortgage specialist's office. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off, and all my remaining accounts were closed. I walked a few doors down and opened a new account with another bank. I was a happy man, knowing that I wouldn't have to pay anything again, and unless Laura got a solicitor and took me to court, my smile faded. The next day I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application. I had all the details of Jake and Sarah's new company, and within 10 minutes of applying, I was sent a confirmation email telling me it would take 3 to 5 days to complete. Once this was done, I would simply hand over the deeds to Jake, and he could register the property to his company. That same day, I knocked on Mr. Anderson's door. Jane was in there with him, of course. Fridays were usually the day the dirty old bastard had his way with her, and I think I disturbed their amorous activities. She left us alone. I placed my resignation down on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face. "What's this?" he asked. "My resignation," I replied. "I think it's best if I leave straight away. I'm sure with the situation regarding our families, I doubt you want me here too long." He looked dumbstruck. "I'd be grateful if you can get my P45 ready by Monday, and please don't mention this to anyone." "The wife doesn't know," I said brashly. "You can't do this. We need you," he said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew, apparently. I'll be in on Monday to collect the last of my things." I pretended to drop a pin from my pocket, and when I bent down, I removed the digital recorder from my sock. I had managed to construct a pin to it, and as I stood back up, I hit record and pushed it up under the seat and into the wooden frame. If that's all, Mr. Anderson, I have things to do. Okay, Tom, but don't come crawling back when you're skint. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife of yours with you. Do you realize that? Of course I know that, Mr. Anderson. I wish my wife was as loyal as yours, I said, smiling. I knew that one hit him where it hurt. I turned and left his office. An hour later, I drove home and picked up Laura's car and logbook. I drove to the dealership and dropped off her car. Thankfully, John Reeves offered to drive me home, and I gladly accepted. When I got home that night, Laura was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. I asked her what happened, and she reluctantly told me that she got gonorrhea. I laughed. Did I laugh? And she just glared at me. Well, just take the drugs, and soon enough you will be back on your back. Oops, I mean feet. If looks could kill, I would be dead already. I slept well that night for the first time in months. Of course, I slept in the spare room. Saturday morning, and I was feeling great. The good night's sleep definitely helped me, and I went into our bedroom and woke Laura in bed to tell her I was going to give her some space to rest and recover. You think I'm disgusting, don't you? She said. I said nothing, and suddenly the tears began to flow down her cheeks. I just want you to get better, that's all. Oh, Tom, I do love you so much. I think I've messed up big time. At first I felt bad for her, but it disappeared even quicker than I thought it would. That shocked me a little. I realized then I had lost all love for the woman I've been married to for 22 years. Could it really disappear that quickly? Obviously it could, because I was done, and her situation did nothing to slow me down. I left the room after saying nothing. I got into my car and drove away happily. That night I stayed with Jake and Sarah, who threw a dinner party with many of their friends and colleagues in attendance. When I arrived home late Sunday morning, I found Laura up doing housework. I walked into the lounge, and when she saw me, she launched herself at me and hugged me. I just patted her on the back. She asked when her new car would arrive. I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and then you can ask her to drive you to the dealership. Then you get to drive back your new Range Rover, I said with an excited grin. She smiled and walked towards me with her arms open. I turned back to the kettle, pretending I didn't see her. For the rest of the day, Laura was all around me, and I actually felt uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. I think she got the message, because as I went to bed, I could see that she had been crying again. Good night, Laura. Will you be sleeping with me tonight, Tom? I want to cuddle up to you, and I want you to tell me everything will be okay. I felt nothing. Not until you get the all clear from the doctor, Laura. Sorry, but you made your bed, I said harshly. Well, when I get better, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to be in bed with me. I have plenty of lost time to make up for, she snapped back bitterly. I laughed to myself. It took longer than I expected, but here it was, and the bitch was back. All those regrets from Friday night had disappeared. For the last 22 years, I would have fallen for her. But this time, I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. The last night in my house, and it will be in the spare room. I was also glad that she said those things. It removed any sign of any doubt I might have had. I looked at my mocked-up picture of her and my sisters, and all I could feel was hatred for her. She was only sweet when she wanted something and a bitch when she couldn't get it. I woke early Monday morning. Laura was awake early, too, for her 8:30 hair appointment, so I drove her into town as planned. I drove off, knowing that could be the last time I ever see her. I somehow feared it wouldn't be, but it would for as long as I could make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both our contracts. I pulled over into a lay-by to pay the penalty on my card. They informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. Perfect. Next, I headed for the office to pick up my P45. I entered the factory, and there was a solemn atmosphere. News of my departure must have made the rounds, and for a brief moment, I saw a look of fear on their faces. I did not know why. As I walked down the corridor towards my office, I passed the coffee machine where the usual suspects were gathered. I wasn't exactly sure if Jack and Ben were aware that they were both screwing my wife or not, but here they were, both grinning at me and sharing jokes with the other morons. "Morning, guys," I said gleefully. "Good morning, Tom. How's the wife?" they said to the usual laughter. How this joke was still funny was beyond me. "Oh, not so good, I'm afraid," I replied. "One of you bozos gave her the clap." I walked away to complete silence, and when I turned back, their jaws had dropped, and Jack then yelled something at Ben. I heard a big commotion before heading up the stairs. Jane saw me approaching and gave me a half-smile before putting her head down. Maybe now I was getting some respect. Mr. Anderson was soon at the door before I could knock. "I have what you want, so take it and get out." Maybe that respect thing was in my imagination. I entered his office and sat down. I reached under the chair and surreptitiously put the recorder into my pocket. I knew he would have given Jane his weekly Friday stuffing, and now I had it all on the recorder. "So do you have another job lined up, Tom?" he snapped. I ignored him at first, but thought I would give him what he wanted. "No, nothing." A big smile grew on his face, and he probably thought I would come crawling back to him soon enough. "So do I get my final month's pay and end-of-year bonus now, Mr. Anderson?" I asked. He burst out laughing as Jane walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Tom here just asked for his bonus and pay. That's hilarious," Mr. Anderson said. Jane joined him in laughing at me. I thought, why not? So I joined in. This made them stop and look at me like I had gone mad. "Why are you laughing, Tom?" Jane asked. "I don't know, Jane. Why do you let this old bastard screw you every week?" I said as my laughter grew louder. They froze as her eyes grew wide, and Mr. Anderson began to turn red with anger. "I bet Mommy and Daddy are proud of their little daughter." She dropped my paperwork on the floor and ran out of the room in tears. "You bastard," Mr. Anderson said. "Get the hell out of my office and out of my company before I get the boys to drag you out by your ears." I laughed as I walked out and into my office to collect the last of my things. I was still laughing to myself as I pulled up to my house. I got out and dropped the back seats. I opened the boot and went inside the house. I walked around the house thinking about what I wanted to take with me. I had a few Romero Brito artworks, so I took them down and wrapped them in some plastic I had found in the garage. I packed them into my car and continued around the house collecting things. Finally, I went upstairs and emptied my wardrobe. I took all my paperwork from the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate. I found a loft ladder and went up and found all my old stuff. My degree and the family photos were all up there. I went into the master bedroom and took all the jewelry I had bought Laura over the years. It must have been over VJ15000 worth. Then I took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had bought too. In fact, the whole damn wardrobe was purchased by me, so I took the lot. I was always the responsible one, so I had receipts for nearly everything for insurance purposes. It would serve me well when I came to sell it all. When I was done packing, I realized I would need a TV, so I took that too, along with my movie collection and the Blu-ray player, of course. By now, my car was way too full. I thought I could lose all of Laura's clothes and a few more items I really didn't need, including some of my old clothes. I knew I would require a new wardrobe, and the girls would jump at the chance to help me out with that. I found all the best pictures of me and the girls and packed them into the car. I was in no real rush because Laura wasn't going to be back until after 2 p.m. I made a cup of tea and took 5 minutes. Well, you have to have a cup of tea. It's in the Magna Carta, I think. I picked up my phone and called the TV company and canceled the satellite phone and internet. I called British Gas and Southern Water to cancel the utilities. It would take a few days, but I did not care. I returned to the bedroom and sat on the bed when I noticed something that gave me an idea, one that scared even me. It was sat at the top of the wardrobe in a dusty old box. It was Laura's wedding dress. She loved it probably more than me. I took it down and then found amongst the box of photographs on the bed our wedding album. I grabbed the duvet cover and snatched everything up and headed towards the garden. When I was outside, I walked to the middle of the garden and dumped everything into a pile. I added all of Laura's clothes and her belongings that I knew I couldn't sell. I made sure I left her underwear alone because, well, I did not want to catch anything. I went in my car and closed all the doors up. I was ready to go, and looking at my watch, it was only 1:45 p.m. So I called up Robert Smith and told him I could drop off my P45 later that night with the night shift. That way, I could start work fresh tomorrow morning. He sounded delighted, and I told him I was already working on plans to win him new customers and improve the hydraulic pumps that would make him super competitive in the market. I think he could feel my enthusiasm, and I hoped as I ended the call that I had made his day. It was now 2 p.m., and I sat waiting for the call. I found some paint thinners in the garage and walked out into the garden and poured it all over the wedding dress. I was about to light the fire when my phone rang. "Hello," I said calmly. "What is going on, Tom?" Laura screamed down the phone. "Whatever do you mean, Laura?" I asked sarcastically. "Don't play dumb, Tom," she continued. "Calm down, Laura. What's going on?" There was silence, and I could hear her breathing heavily. I could also hear what sounded like her sister in the background. "They told me you have not bought me a new car, but sold mine instead." "Oh yes, did I forget to tell you that?" I said. "What are you talking about, Tom? What's going on?" She started to sound panicked. "Well, from now on, if you want a car, you can pay for it yourself," I said, trying to remain as calm as I could. My heart was racing. "What?" she yelled. "I don't understand, Tom," she said meekly and sounding very confused. "You heard me just fine, Laura. You want it, you can buy it. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to tidy up the kitchen. Is this some kind of sick joke?" I said nothing. "We will talk about this when I get home, Tom. I'm not happy about being pranked," she screamed again. I remained silent. I could hear her out of breath as though she was walking at pace to her sister's car. The slamming door confirmed it. I knew she was on her way. In her state, she could convince her sister to be here in 5 minutes. Tom. "Yes," I replied almost too calmly. "Did you say you were in our kitchen?" she asked, suddenly realizing what I had said. "Yes." "Why are you not at work?" she asked. I said nothing. Tom. She was now breathless, and I could hear the panic and confusion in her voice. I put the phone down as she continued screaming my name. I walked outside, struck a match, and lit the pile. Our past went up in flames as I walked away. I took our marriage certificate from my pocket, tore it into pieces, and left it on the kitchen table along with a single photograph of us all on holiday in Disneyland. It was a great time with many happy memories. I wondered if she thought so too. I got into my car and drove away. As I got to the end of the street, I could see in my rearview mirror Laura and her sister pulling up to the house. Neither of them looked up. They just ran into the house. I switched my phone off, smiled, and pulled away. I was in Leeds by 4 p.m. and decided I had time to visit a local phone shop and set up a new mobile phone contract. I also managed to catch the administration team at work to process my P45, and I met Freya, my new secretary. She was pretty young but held herself very professionally, a complete contrast to Jane. I made my way back to my new flat, which was completely empty. I had running water and electricity, so I found the kettle I took from home and made a cup of tea. I moved my stuff in and ordered a pizza. I picked up my old phone and switched it on. The service had been terminated. I smiled to myself, knowing that Laura was now without a phone too, and that should give the girls some breathing space before I get to speak to them. I found my sleeping bag and arranged it out in the lounge and waited for dinner. I had some furniture arriving at the weekend, but for now, I was at least glad to be away from Laura. I switched on my laptop and located the voice recordings I made in Mr. Anderson's office. I uploaded the content and played it back to hear the incriminating evidence of his infidelity with Jane. I grabbed 2 USB sticks and made a couple of copies. I wrote the addresses of Margaret Anderson, wife of Mr. Anderson, and Peter Lewis, boyfriend of Jane, and then placed a stick into each one. I would post them tomorrow before work. Finally, I decided to call my daughter Emily to let her know the latest and not to let on to their mother where I was. To my surprise, she admitted that she hadn't even spoken to her mother yet, but of course I guessed she had no phone to be able to do that. In the week that followed, I managed to get my flat furnished and wasted no time at work in contacting customers of Anderson Engineering and convincing them to switch to Harris Hydraulics. They saw what we were offering and jumped ship very quickly. A couple decided to stay with Mr. Anderson, but the majority hated the guy but tolerated him because of the superior products we offered. I knew it wouldn't take long for Mr. Anderson to find out why his business was losing customers, but I really did not care. I also knew that with all the utilities now cut off at my old home, Laura would realize I was not coming back. There is no way she could afford the bills, so I knew it was safe for Jake to start the sales process. Sarah delighted in being the one to get the ball rolling, and by the end of the week, the signs were up. It was at this time I was contacted by Olivia. Apparently, Laura had moved into her parents' house, and they were not happy that their little princess was a cheat. Laura was after my blood, of course, and livid by what I had done to her. Strangely, I found that hugely satisfying, but knew this was not the end to it. By the weekend, I was invited to another dinner party at Jake and Sarah's house. The dinner was a complete success, and I found myself completely relaxed for the first time since I planned to escape Laura. Sunday morning brought good news. After only a week on the market, I had received 2 serious offers. I accepted one for VJ 650,000 straight away. I knew it could be some time before it completed, but I made arrangements for the money. Once it was finalized, I would set up savings accounts in the girls' names and then ask Jake to spread the rest amongst numerous investment funds. I would also pay him back and take a chunk in cash to keep in my home safe. I still felt the need to protect myself. As another week passed, I was delighted to find out from Jake that the sale could be very quick. I contacted a removal company and instructed them to empty my old house. The girls called their mother and asked her if she wanted anything, and she was now even angrier and threatening. I promised the girls that it would soon all be over. On Tuesday morning, I was talking to one of our new clients who had been in a meeting with Mr. Anderson over a possible renewal of a supply contract. He had told Mr. Anderson that he would be moving to Harris Hydraulics, and Mr. Anderson was not surprised. He had found out that Anderson Engineering had to cut 50% of its staff due to loss of work. He also informed me that Mrs. Anderson was divorcing Mr. Anderson for adultery. I had absolutely no sympathy as I was totaling up the commission checks in my head whilst talking. I had no idea what happened to Jane and her boyfriend, but I knew he had gotten my gift if Mrs. Anderson had received hers. And even if he hadn't, I am sure it was well known why Mrs. Anderson was divorcing her husband. I wonder what her friends and family would think of her cheating with an old man. To reward me for all the new work, I was given a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. I was thinking of treating myself anyway, but Robert and the bosses were so pleased with me and the way the company was headed that I was given the car and a fair few thousand in commission. Well, it was actually more than VJ 30,000. I was looking out of the window of my office, admiring my brand new car, when a familiar-looking Ford Focus pulled into the car park. I froze as I realized who it belonged to. It was Diane's car, Laura's mom. I sat down at my chair and waited for the inevitable call. The phone began to ring and I picked up. "Mr. Smith, there's a woman here in reception claiming to be your wife," Freya, my secretary, said. "Tell her I'm in a meeting and I'll be down in an hour." 3 hours later, I peered out the window and she was still sat there. I exhaled loudly and decided to leave for the night. If she saw me, then I would have to deal with it. If not, I would just drive on past. It was not like she knew what car to look out for. I left through a side door and made my way to my car. I was just getting into my car when I heard a screech of tires, and before I knew it, there she was, pulling up behind the car and blocking me in. She leapt out of the car and stormed up to me with a face like thunder. She looked like hell, and her clothes were obviously her sister's old ones, and it looked like her hair hadn't been brushed in weeks. "You bastard!" she screamed as she threw a slap in my direction and missed. She was furious. She wanted my blood. I told her to calm down and step in the car with me. She stepped in and was surprised to see the new car. She stated that she is broke and wants me back. I told her that since I cannot satisfy her and I do not measure up to her young studs, there was no need for me in her life. She then stated, "Please come home, Tom. Can we put all this behind us? I forgive you." What did she just say? Were my ears deceiving me? "You forgive me?" I asked, hoping I misheard. "Yes, Tom. I will forgive you for destroying my belongings and my life." "Are you delusional, Laura?" I asked. She just looked at me like I was the crazy one. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the audacity to say you forgive me." But I thought, "No, Laura, you only think about yourself. I will never be with you again, so go away and be with one of your lovers," I said coldly. She then stated, "My friends treat me differently now. We are separated and their husbands have started to question their fidelity, meaning I have been kicked to the curb. I could be a bad influence if you can believe that." The truth is, she was in part responsible for all the bad things that had befallen her, but I did have sympathy for her. She messed up and was paying the price, but how big was that price? She had a great life and ruined it through greed and disrespect. However, I knew I had to move on. "I have nothing left, Tom. I need you and I want you back in my life. I have no money and no job. When will I get my share of the house?" There it was. "At no point have you told me you love me. You just need me, Laura, but I do not need you. As for the house, I defaulted on the mortgage and lost it." I lied. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. She was shocked by what I had said, but at least I knew what this visit was all about. "I want a divorce," I said. "No, please, Tom. Of course I love you. Over 20 years together, and I made a little mistake, and you burned me down. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Laura, and I will never come home to you." "Please, Tom," she screamed, her cries echoing through the car. "I want a clean break, and if you agree to it, I will give you VJ 30,000 in cash," I offered. I saw her face change, and a new resolve replaced the tears. "You know," she yelled, "I will fight you in court for everything. There is no way you lost the house. You've are too smart for that." She was right, and now she had me on the back foot. "Okay, Laura, I'll put it this way," I started. "You will never get a penny out of me." She moved her hips around and fronted up to me. "I'll fight you for everything and more, Tom. You have no money, Laura, and I will move my assets around so much you will spend a fortune trying to track down the money. I'm smart, remember? So, by the time your solicitor finds it, you would have racked up a bill that would wipe out any gain. I suggest you take the money I'm offering, or I funnel that away, too. Your call," I said sternly, never letting my eyes leave hers. "You bastard! I loved you and gave you children, and this is how you treat me," she said angrily. "Thanks to me, our girls will go far. They won't be liars or cheats, and they will be selfless and not selfish like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life." My anger was beginning to come to the surface, and she looked at me as though I was a stranger. "Okay," she spat. "I'll take the money and agree to the divorce." "Good. I'll get it arranged." With that, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. Seconds later, she sped away and out of the car park. The following day, I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and a week later I arranged to meet Laura at the girls' flat. The sale of my house had gone through, but I held off investing it until the papers were signed. We attempted to be civil in front of the girls, but it was a struggle. I handed Laura the cash, and she signed the papers. I kissed the girls goodbye and wished Laura good luck. As I was about to leave, she just burst into tears again, but I got the feeling they were just for the girls' benefit. Emily and Olivia looked at me and raised their eyebrows. They knew. "See you next weekend, Dad," Olivia said as I walked to the door. I walked back into the room as Laura continued sobbing, and nobody paid any attention to her. I suddenly realized what Olivia was talking about. "Oh yeah, the Coldplay gig. Everyone is looking forward to it. Will we be meeting you guys in London, or shall we travel together?" Emily asked. "I'll speak to Amy and let you know in the week," I said finally before leaving. As I walked out the door, I heard Laura shouting something, but I chose to ignore it and left. Thank you for watching. What do you think about Tom v. DJ TM's journey to reclaim his life after discovering his wife's betrayal? Do you think he handled it the right way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And Don v. DJ TMT, forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. It was a Friday afternoon, and Men's Day at the Sunny Hill Country Club, where I had a standing date to play golf with 3 of my friends. We played golf every Friday afternoon from early March until late September, with rare exceptions. Today was one of those exceptions. Mark, one of our friends, had called me at 9:00 a.m. and said, "Sorry, buddy, but Alex and I will not be able to make it for golf this afternoon. We have an emergency meeting to go over some blueprint changes on the shopping center project we're working on." They work together at an engineering firm, and I knew Mark wouldn't back out on golf unless he absolutely had to. "I apologize for the late notice," he said, "but we just don't have any alternative but to attend the meeting." I told him I totally understand, don't worry about it. Jim and I will have to find a couple of other pushovers to give us some of their money. He laughed. "I know you're happy to let us off today because you will save lots of money." We both said goodbye with, "See you next week." I called Jim, one of my best friends, and mentioned the circumstances to him. He said, "As long as Mark and Alex can't make it, why don't we take the afternoon off from golf too so I can catch up on some projects at home? That will free up my Sunday for something else." I love to play golf, but I wouldn't miss it if we skipped one day either, so I agreed, but only after giving him some ribbing for the change in plans. We agreed to get in touch Saturday night to see if he and his wife Rachel, and me and my wife Lisa, could connect up sometime over the weekend for cocktails or dinner or both. I headed home after lunch, hoping that Lisa and I could do something together for the afternoon. When I drove into the garage, her car wasn't there, and I cursed to myself for not calling her as soon as I knew about the change of plans. Oh well, I thought, as long as she isn't home, I might as well make the best of it and do some of the honeydew projects that I had on my list too. I went into the house and looked around for a note from her, but there was none. I also checked the answering machine and there were no messages on it, so I had no clue where she was. Then I remembered we had caller ID that saved the last 20 calls we received, so I looked at the history to see if there was any clue as to where she was. To my surprise, the last 3 calls were from a number I recognized. They were from Gary's phone. I knew Gary because for a couple of years he was part of our foursome. He quit playing golf about a year ago because he had a problem with his knee, but he had not left the country club. He was still a social member, and I saw him there on occasion. After he quit golfing, Mark got Alex, a man he worked with, to play with us in his place. Gary was one of Mark's friends, but I knew him too. I looked back to Thursday's calls, and there were 2 calls from Gary's phone then also. I checked back over the entire 20 saved numbers, and 15 of them were calls from Gary's phone. I knew that Lisa did not get along that well with Gary's wife, so I couldn't imagine why she would have been talking to her. I was bewildered just what was going on here. I decided to call Lisa on her cell phone, and when she answered, I asked her, "Hi, honey, what's happening?" She said, "Nothing much. I was just vacuuming the living room. What's up with you?" Now I was standing in the kitchen, and I didn't hear the vacuum cleaner running and was pretty sure she wasn't in there since her car wasn't home, but I did walk in there just to be sure. No, she wasn't in there. I told her, "Not much here either. The guys all had other things to do today, so we are not golfing. I thought maybe I would come home and catch up on some of the honeydew projects. I will see you in a little while." She said, "Oh, okay, but I might not be there when you get home. I have to run to the store to pick up a few things." She sure was thinking fast on her feet if she was on her feet. I am not without my own wits either, so I suggested that I could stop at the store for her as long as it was on my way home. She hesitated a moment, but then said, "Okay, that will be great." "What is it you need?" I asked. "Just a minute, I have to go get my list. Damn, I married one smart and obviously devious woman. Pick up some milk, eggs, paper towels, and some steaks for Sunday night. Oh, and maybe some dessert in case we have company," she added. "Okay, bye, honey," I said. "I will see you in a little while," she said. "Goodbye." I figured I better get out of there for a while to see what happened. She obviously wasn't home now, but would she get back here in a few minutes? I just needed to get away and think this through. I got in my car and drove to the store, but didn't go right in. I sat there thinking for a while first. Lisa and I had been married for almost 6 years. We didn't have any children, but were thinking about having a couple sometime in the near future. I was 33 and she was 29. We had met about 7 years ago after I had gotten out of the Army. We were both in college at the University of Michigan, she a sophomore, and I finishing up my last year. We met and dated off and on for almost a year, then pretty steadily for a year after I graduated. We were married, and she has continued to go to school part-time to finish up her bachelor's degree and get her master's degree. She's almost finished but has been taking the summer off this year. She is a very pretty woman with a very nice figure, and she has a wonderful personality to go with her looks. Lisa is very well liked among our friends and family, and she almost always turns heads when we go out. I can get a little jealous if men pay too much attention to her, but I have never acted on that jealousy in a way that would upset her, and she has never given me reason to doubt her faithfulness to me. Lisa was my love, my very best friend, my confidant, my life. Ever since we had been dating steadily, I thought our minds and hearts were melded together. I could sense her feelings and she mine. I could smell her fears and she mine. I could feel her heartbeat quicken when I looked at her, and she could feel the desire in me when she walked past me and I watched her go. There were lots of unspoken messages that flowed between the two of us on a daily basis. We just knew each other so well and were bound together so tightly that we were truly one. What could have happened here? I never knew Lisa to lie to me ever, and I couldn't see any reason for it now except that she was up to something I wouldn't like very much. I knew she didn't like Gary's wife all that much, but there were lots of calls from his number. If it wasn't Gary's wife, then was it Gary? Then it hit me. At the last country club social event about 3 months ago, he had been dancing a lot with Lisa. At the time, I was a bit jealous because she seemed to be enjoying his attention way too much, but I let it slide because he and I were friends and had been close because of the golf matches. As I thought about that, I recalled that we had had a bit of an argument that morning, and she was still upset with me when I got home from work. I don't even remember what the argument was about, but she was rather mad. It also dawned on me that the connection between her and I that I just mentioned hasn't been as strong the last couple of months. Had I been lulled into thinking everything was still the same? Obviously I had, but now I knew that something was going on, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. I went into the store, bought the groceries we needed, and headed home. When I got there, Lisa was just getting out of the shower and told me I just finished cleaning the house and thought I would get cleaned up myself. Thanks for getting the stuff from the store. Why don't you put it away, and I will be down in a little bit. I have never been one to sidestep problems. I guess my Army training has taught me to face life head-on and without hesitation, so when she came downstairs, I asked her to sit down because I had something I wanted to discuss with her. I said, "Lisa, you are my wife, my love, my lover, and my very best friend in the whole world. I have been here for you and you for me since we started to date steadily. You are the one person I turn to when I need a rock to stand on, and I hope you feel the same way." I looked into her eyes and could see a tear start to form. I continued, "I have to tell you, for the last couple of months, I feel like there is a wall being built in our relationship, and that wall has shut me out from your inner self, and I don't like it at all. Have I done something that created that wall?" I saw her shaking her head, but no words came from her lips. I continued, "Please talk to me, Lisa, and let me know what is happening to us. I can't bear to have us grow apart like this." She had a tear running down her cheek now, and she looked down at her feet and said, "Brian, I don't know why you feel there is a wall being built between us. I love you, and I know you love me." "Then why can't you look at me when you talk to me?" I asked. She glanced up at me with a shocked look on her face, then looked back down and replied, "I guess there are some things I have to work through. I am sorry you feel there is a wall between us." With that, she got up and ran upstairs crying. Well, I knew that we had some major problems going on in our marriage now. I pretty much suspected what they were, but she wouldn't talk to me, and I had no proof of anything, so I decided to see what would happen. I walked up to the bedroom and talked to her through the bedroom door. "Lisa, if you want to talk to me, I am here for you. I love you and want to help you with whatever is bothering you, or work on anything I have done that is making you unhappy. Please talk to me when you're ready." I went outside and began to work on the projects. My heart was aching. I don't know how to describe it to you, but I felt pretty empty inside. I don't care if I was a big, tough Army vet. The tears flowed, and I felt pretty vulnerable. I didn't know what I would do if I lost Lisa, if she wasn't my wife and lover. I just felt so powerless and weak I was in a panic, to be honest. Lisa did not come down for dinner, and when I checked on her at 7:00 p.m., she was sound asleep. So I went into the spare bedroom to sleep for the night. In the morning I got up and went to work early, so we didn't talk in the morning. I called Jim and told him that I thought we probably wouldn't be doing anything together that night or on Saturday either, for that matter. But I asked him if he could meet me for lunch. When we met for lunch, I explained to Jim what had happened and asked him what he thought of the whole situation. He dropped a bomb on me. He told me that he and Rachel had suspected something was going on between Lisa and Gary right after the country club's social gathering. Rachel had seen Lisa's car in Gary's neighborhood. I asked, "Why wouldn't you say anything to me?" He said, "We talked about it but felt we ought to stay out of it because we really didn't know what was happening." "Okay, I can understand that," I said. "Please don't tell anyone that you and I have talked, not even Rachel. I want to figure out what I'm going to do about this, and I don't need a lot of gossip and outside input." I decided that I would have to have proof of her infidelity before I could handle the situation. I tried to attack it head-on, but her refusal to talk to me or acknowledge a problem growing between us told me I would need to have proof before I confronted her with specifics. I took the afternoon off and drove over to Gary's house to see if her car was there. It wasn't, so I didn't know when they might meet again. I called home around 4:00 p.m. and told Lisa I would be home at 4:30 p.m. She said she was happy I was getting home early. When I arrived, Lisa was warm and caring. She hugged me and smiled at me with that smile that always warms my own heart. I could tell she was trying to be close to me, but it just didn't feel the same to me. I could sense she was trying, and we never had to try, it just happened. I asked her if she wanted to go out to eat dinner, and she said yes. When she went upstairs to change her clothes, I checked the caller ID, and sure enough there were 2 calls from Gary, one at 11:00 a.m. and another at 1:00 p.m. I didn't know what to make of those calls, but I knew that she didn't meet him that afternoon. The weekend was pretty uneventful. We did a few things together, and she wanted me to make love with her on a couple of occasions, but I just couldn't, so I made up an excuse that I had a sore back. On Sunday night, when I told her that, I saw her shudder and saw a tear form again. I just couldn't bring myself to be intimate with her until I got to the bottom of this supposed affair. On Monday, I arranged to get a few hours off each afternoon that entire week so I could check up on Lisa. I knew if something was really going on, I would need to catch her. Nothing happened on Monday, but again, there were 3 calls from Gary. Nothing happened on Tuesday, 2 calls. Nothing on Wednesday, no calls. But on Thursday at noon, Lisa called me and told me that since I would be golfing and eating at the club, she was planning on going to the library to work on her thesis for the afternoon and evening, and not to expect her home until around 8:00 p.m. or so. I think she was expecting me to tell her if I was not golfing. Well, I wasn't going to golf, but I wasn't telling her that. I drove over to Gary's house and parked out of the line of traffic so I could watch his house. I had my camera with the telephoto lens with me, so I could take pictures if she showed up. At 1:00 p.m., Lisa drove up and parked on the street outside his house. She got out and went up to the door, and Gary opened it for her right away so she could hurry in. I sat there with my camera snapping pictures from the time she drove up until she walked in the door and it was shut. I could barely see through the viewfinder because of all the tears streaming out of my eyes, but I did take lots of pictures. 2 hours later, the door opened, and out she came. Gary reached out and pulled her back to himself and kissed her. He was standing in his doorway in a shirt and a pair of boxers. She was clearly kissing him back and reached down and slipped her hand inside his boxers and was rubbing him. Eventually, she broke off the kiss, and I could see her pointing to her watch. I assumed she was planning on meeting him later as well. She hurried to her car and drove off. The entire time I was snapping picture after picture of the kiss, her hand in his boxers, and her driving off with Gary standing in the doorway. I didn't need to see them actually having sex to know that they had. You don't spend 2 hours together, kiss like I saw them kiss, and rub someone's tool like that unless you have been intimate. I knew it. No one can imagine the hurt and disappointment and anger I felt. My vision blurred, my head pounded, my stomach was in knots. I could feel my heart pounding like an air hammer breaking concrete. The feelings I had were overwhelming to me, and I knew at that moment I was lost. My life was over. The one person in the whole world I loved and trusted and depended upon had betrayed me, had broken my trust, and yes, had destroyed my manhood. I would never be able to forgive her. I would never be able to live with her again. I would never be able to live without her. I reached under my car seat for my Glock 19, a 10-round 9mm semi-automatic. I drove my car up in front of Gary's house, walked up to his front door, broke through it, and searched his house until I found him upstairs in his shower. I opened the shower door and leveled the gun at him. The shock on his face was unbelievable. I almost laughed at him. I said, "Gary, you and those like you are the scum of the earth. Any man who would go after and screw another man's wife doesn't deserve to live. You have destroyed a good marriage. You have destroyed a good woman, 2 good women actually, including your own wife. You have destroyed me, and now I am going to destroy you." I fired 2 rounds into his groin, 2 into his belly, 2 into his chest, and 2 into his head. Then I left him there and walked out. I drove home and went into the house. I could hear that Lisa was in the shower, so I downloaded the pictures onto our computer. When she came downstairs, I was sitting in the family room waiting for her. She was surprised to see me, and I could sense the fear in her. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I told her that I had taken the afternoon off from golf again, and that I had seen her arrive and leave Gary's house. I told her that I knew she was having an affair, and I had pictures to prove it. I started a slideshow of the pictures to run behind me as I talked to her. I asked her to explain to me why she did it. I asked her to explain to me why she didn't talk to me a week ago when I asked her what was wrong. I asked her to tell me what I had done to drive her into Gary's arms. I asked her to tell me how she could do that to me. I asked her how she could do that to our marriage. I asked her to tell me how she could do that to herself. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, moaning and shaking her head back and forth. I screamed, "Talk to me!" But no words came from her mouth. No explanation, nothing. She had nothing to say to me. The despair I felt at that moment was the worst yet. I wanted to know so much, but she wouldn't tell me anything. She never said, "I love you." She never said, "I am sorry." She never said a thing, just moaning and shaking her head. Let's check the story from Lisa's perspective. The last 6 months have been a blur for me. For most of that time, I didn't know who I was, where I was, or what I was. Only now do I understand what happened to me so long ago. Only after months in a hospital and months of psychiatric counseling do I understand what I have done. I wish I didn't understand, but I do. Brian raised a gun and pointed it at me. I was so shocked from the realization that he knew about me and Gary. But when he raised the gun, I got so frightened I just shook. I screamed, "Don't, please don't!" Then I looked at the hate in his eyes and knew our marriage was over, and maybe my life too. I could also see the hurt and utter emptiness in his eyes, and it made my skin crawl. I could see him going totally mad. And I knew it was all over for me. This wasn't the man I loved, the man who loved me. This was something else, and yes, I do say something, not someone. He said with a voice cold as steel, "Lisa, just look at the pictures." I glanced at the screen and saw shot after shot of me going into Gary's house, Gary and me kissing at his door, me with my hand on Gary's tool. There were so many pictures proving my infidelity to Brian. Then the last pictures I saw were of Gary lying in his shower, blood everywhere. I heard myself groan with the realization of what he had done. As I jerked my gaze back to Brian, he had turned the gun, putting it into his mouth, and after he said, "Goodbye, Lisa," he pulled the trigger. They tell me that police found me in shock holding Brian. They tell me that gunshots had been heard at Gary's house, and someone got the license number of the car that drove away. They tell me that they knew it was our car and were already on the way over to our house. They tell me that I wouldn't let go of Brian for them to take him away. They tell me that I had snapped mentally, and nothing that was said or done for me would bring me out of it. They tell me that they took me to the hospital and admitted me. They tell me so many things because I cannot remember much at all what happened from then until now. I do remember what happened before that day, and now, 6 months later. I remember that Brian and I had fought, though I don't recall what it was about, and I was pissed at him. We went to the party at the club, and I was just going to make his life miserable. It so happened that Gary asked me to dance with him, so I thought, why not? I will use this to make Brian pay. Oh, Gary was slick, I will give him that, and he had me going almost instantly with his compliments. He told me how lovely I was. Now, what woman doesn't like to hear that? He told me that I was the prettiest woman at the club that night, and I was just so excited to hear that. He told me that he always wanted to spend time with me because I was so sweet, so smart, and so sexy. How could I resist such charm? I could have, but I was pissed at Brian and didn't want to. I kept encouraging Gary, and I could see that Brian was upset, but he didn't do a thing about it. Some sick thing in my mind told me a lie at that moment. It told me that Brian really didn't care, so why should I? Oh, what a lie that was, but I bought those thoughts so completely that when Gary called me the next Friday, I bought it all and agreed to have lunch with him. We had a pretty intense conversation during lunch about us. Gary told me he would like to make love to such a beautiful woman, and even though I blushed, even though I knew it would be wrong, even though I felt it would betray the only man I loved, I was too weak to resist his charm. After all, I had convinced myself that Brian didn't care about me, that anything I did to him he had deserved. The next thing I knew, we were in Gary's house and were kissing passionately. He was a very good kisser, and I could feel myself getting hotter and hotter, wetter and wetter. I did nothing to resist when his hand slid down my body. I liked the way it felt to have him caress me, kiss me. I needed that so bad. By this time, there was no stopping it. Soon we were both naked, and yes, we did everything I should have only done with my husband. We made love to each other with our mouths for a couple of hours before he actually entered me. Oh, it was so hot. I will never forget that first time with Gary. I've never been so turned on in my entire life, and when he pushed himself into me, it felt like a hot poker was being inserted into me. It had me burning in an instant, and I could hear myself begging him to screw me senseless, and that is exactly what he did. He drilled me and drilled me like no one, not even Brian, had ever drilled me. I didn't even try to count the number of times I came that afternoon, many while he pleasured me orally and many more being used by his tool. Oh yes, he used me for his pleasure, but in doing so had pleasured me like I had never been pleasured before. I have to tell you, I loved it. Make no mistake, I loved it and knew that I would be back for more. That night and in the days that followed, I felt a change in my relationship with Brian. He said there was a wall being built, and he was absolutely right. I felt our connection slip just like he must have felt it. I felt the gap form between us, and I felt my heart torn from the separation. And you know how stupid I was? I blamed it on him. That lie told me it was his fault. The next week, Gary called me a couple of times every day. He was so sweet and loving to me, telling me how much he enjoyed making love to me, asking me if I was all right. He was perfect, and when he suggested we get together again on Friday, I agreed without a qualm. It was Brian's own fault for not caring about me. Well, we met every Friday afternoon from then until the night that Brian confronted me. I loved every minute of the time with Gary. The sex was great, and I thought he would wear me out with orgasms because I had so many each time we were together. I made a point of only having sex with Brian when he absolutely insisted, and each time I would tell myself Gary did me better. I could feel that wall growing between Brian and myself and didn't care. Then he confronted me. He told me how much he loved me, how much I meant to him, and what a huge part of his life was tied to me. He told me I was his very best friend, his love and lover. He told me I was his rock. He begged me to tell him if he had done something wrong, something to build that wall. He pleaded with me to let him back into myself. In that instant, I knew. I knew my lie to myself had caused me to hurt the only man I loved. I knew I had built the wall, not him. I knew I had betrayed every good thing he felt about me. I was not his love. I was not his lover. I wasn't his best friend, and I was not a rock. I was a cheater, a slut who gave herself to another man, a liar who stopped at nothing to hide her guilt and shame. At that moment, I knew just what I was, and I couldn't bear to be there with him. I ran up to the bedroom and cried until I fell asleep crying. The next morning, Brian was gone already when I woke up. When he came home that night, I did everything I could to prove to him that I loved him and cared for him. I could tell that the connection between us wasn't there, not like it had been before, but I tried so hard to be the same. I failed. I could sense it in Brian. I didn't think he knew about Gary. I thought he just knew there was a wall between us. But I never dreamed he would have found out about Gary. I should have known better, but I didn't. On Monday, Gary started calling just like he had all those weeks before. He called me a couple of times or more a day most days, but I told him that I would not be meeting with him anymore. He was surprised and didn't understand. Finally, I agreed to meet with him one last time to explain it all to him and break it off. I went into his house again, and yes, we did have sex. It wasn't the same as all of those other times. I did have a couple of orgasms just because of the intensity of the sexual activity, but it wasn't the same because I knew it wasn't Brian's fault. I knew I was cheating on a man who loved me more than anyone else could. I knew I was a betraying wife, and I just didn't get off on it like I had before. I told Gary I was sorry, but I couldn't continue our affair and to please not call me anymore. He smiled and told me he understood and that he wouldn't be a problem for me. He told me he loved me and would always care for me. He was as sweet as ever, and truthfully, I loved a part of him too. And I didn't want him to be hurt either. As I was leaving, he grabbed me and pulled me to himself and told me how wonderful a lover I was. Instinctively, after 2 months of intimacy, my hand drifted down and into his boxers, and I rubbed his tool one last time. I broke off the kiss and ran to my car to go home and wait for Brian. When I got home, I went to shower and cleaned myself up. I was going to fix myself all up for when Brian got home. I was going to start this night to tear down the wall that was built between us. I would rebuild the connection between us. We would be the same as we had been before. But when I went downstairs after my shower to get some clothes out of the dryer, Brian was sitting at the computer waiting for me. He told me he knew about Gary. He asked me so many questions about why I had done such a horrible thing to him, to our marriage, to myself, but I couldn't speak. I had done everything I could up to that point to start back to where we used to be. He found out. Now nothing I did could make it right. He found out. That is all I could think, and I couldn't say a word. I just stood there with tears streaming down my face. I just stood there moaning and shaking my head back and forth. He screamed, "Talk to me!" But no words came out of my mouth. I was in shock, I know, but it was soon to get worse. He told me, "Look at the pictures." When I did, I saw them all right up to the point of Gary lying dead in his shower. When I glanced back at Brian, I first saw the gun. Soon it was over. He was dead. The next thing I remember is a couple of weeks ago in the hospital. Oh, there is some healing going on in my mind. Everyone believes I have made great strides in getting myself back on track. They have talked about letting me go off on my own for some outings. They tell me that after a few more weeks, I probably could go to an assisted living home and then eventually be able to have my own home. I am healed enough to understand that my reaction needs to be positive in order for me to be on my own, and I will do everything I can to heal this broken woman. But you must know that once I am free, I will end the torture I have to endure. The torture of knowing that I killed Brian. I killed our love. I killed our friendship. I killed everything I had in life worth living for. I know I cannot endure that torture forever. I will have to end it. Now for the second story. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, straightened my tie, and pulled it a little more snugly around my neck. I smiled, making sure my teeth were clean and no lingering piece of something or other was there to mar my visage. To my image, I said, "Joe, my man, you look marvelous." I nodded once to myself, impressed at my own cleverness, stepped back, picked up my wallet, watched a clean handkerchief, and then, as ready as I would ever be, walked downstairs to the kitchen. I smelled coffee as I strode in and reached for a cup as I passed the counter where they were kept on a small rack. Coffee smells good. I really need a cup before I have to do this thing. This thing was a meeting I really didn't want to have with a vendor I disliked immensely, but he was a necessary evil, and I had little choice. It was first thing, so at least the rest of the day would be tolerable. I didn't hate my job, but it was really boring. I needed to change, and if something didn't happen soon, I was going to make my own change. I was speaking to Nancy, my wife of 20 years and the love of my life. Actually, her name was Anastasia, but everyone called her Nancy. That came from a little sister who couldn't pronounce her name, and Nancy is what came out. It stuck. We had a son, Patrick, who left for college 2 months ago, leaving the house an empty nest. At least that's what they called it when the last or only child left the home. Why, I had no idea. Nancy and I would still be here, and we counted for something. Or, at least I felt we did. But hey, who understood those witticisms that everyone said when they didn't know what else to say? I directed my attention to my quiet wife. "Have any plans of your own today? I should be home on time, and I thought maybe we could go out to dinner tonight, save you having to fix anything, and we haven't done that for a while. Might be fun." I threw it out, expecting her to turn it down as usual. "No, I don't have any real plans, but I might go do some shopping, check out some shops, anything like that. And no to the dinner. I'll be too tired anyway. I'll just call for some takeout." I looked at her, not the least bit surprised by her answer. She was not even looking at me, and probably hadn't even when I came in or spoke first. She hadn't been looking at me for some time now, longer than I could remember. "Well, I didn't expect you would go for it, but I wanted to ask. Takeout is fine. It's something you've gotten very good at preparing." That was a sarcastic and mean response, but it was also true. I knew I could say it, however, since it would be too much trouble for her to respond in anything other than an apathetic word or two. As I waited, I was proved correct when she simply looked up for a second and then back down, ignoring me. Her response was typical, and what I expected, the pattern I had learned to live with. One that began long before today. It began some time before Patrick left for college and had nothing to do with the empty nest syndrome that Arthur, my friend and resident amateur shrink, kept telling me was the cause. Nancy had changed a lot in just a short time. It's ironic that we had been happily married for those 20 years, and we dated a year before that. She and I had been a team, a couple with dreams and plans, and we shared everything. That began to change about a year ago, and the change had become more pronounced as time passed. The Nancy I married was becoming a stranger in our home, and the loss was tearing me apart. The real problem was that she didn't see it and refused to do anything about it. In truth, a lot of things had changed. Nancy used to go to the gym with Patrick when he was home, but he told me she had stopped several months before he left. She still looked trim and fit, but it was beginning to be obvious that she was starting to slip around the waist, and I could see just a little bit of a tummy beginning. Not enough to make her less attractive, but enough to let me know something had changed. In addition, she had begun to be irritable and snappish with me. Nothing major, but it was rare that we could have a conversation without her ending it with some snide comment about me or my habits. Little things like my hours being too long or the trips too many. I hardly ever worked overtime now, and I hadn't traveled for almost 8 months. But it didn't have to be correct, just something to snap at me about. The old Nancy would never do that without trying to smooth things over by discussion. Nancy always talked first and acted later. Her behavior changed radically, and that affected the way we interacted with others. Nancy was just 45 but looked younger. I was older at almost 51, but I tried to stay fit for her. Most people would think we were both younger than our ages, and we had always been proud of that. But that was when we went anywhere together, and that hadn't been the case in almost a year. No reason, just her refusal for one reason or another. In truth, I had stopped asking about 7 or 8 months ago. There was no longer any point. The comment about tonight and dinner was asked in a sarcastic tone, not that she would notice, just like her answer had been automatic. The thing I noticed, of course, being a man, was that our love life had simply faded away and died. We had always had an active and varied sex life. We did everything and enjoyed each other completely. We knew what the other liked, and we always made sure that they were satisfied. But that changed. I asked, I begged, I pleaded. I did all I could to find out what happened and why she suddenly stopped wanting to make love. But her answer was just a shrug and a comment about change of life and being too tired most of the time. She refused to see anyone and finally got angry when I continued to bring it up. Being the man I am, I simply let it go, hoping it would pass once she got through the change. Being the man I am may be one of the reasons our life is in the state it is. All of these things went through my mind as I sat alone with my wife at the table. I finished my coffee, rinsed my cup, and placed it on the drain board. I walked over to the door, picked up my briefcase, looked back at her sitting motionless at the table, and said, "See you tonight." There was no response. I opened the door and walked out to my car, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. God, how I had loved that woman my whole adult life. How I had wanted to grow old with her and do all the things we talked about when we were younger, all the things we dreamed about, the things we could do and the places we could go. It was not even a year ago when she talked about the possibility of our moving to California if I got that promotion to regional VP. It was a strong possibility and still was. She hated living here in the Midwest where the winters were long and cold, and the summers were short and not all that warm. She hated the cold. I was still depressed as I opened the door to my office and turned on the lights. I settled down behind my desk, opened my computer, and waited for it to boot up. I got a cup of office coffee, grabbed a donut from the box someone had brought, and went back to open my email. I was munching on a coffee-soaked bit of donut when I opened the email from my boss requesting I get my butt into his office ASAP. I smiled at that since it was not that uncommon to be summoned that way. TJ and I went back a long time, both of us joining Randall Manufacturing around the same time. Now he was a senior VP of design and implementation, and I was a senior manager of research and design. I finished the donut, wiped my face, and walked down the hall to his corner office. I passed the desk of Arthur Malone, my friend and confidant, and waved in greeting, a quick word or two, a promise to stop on my way back, and then on to TJ's lair. I stopped to talk to Marion, his secretary, who told me to go right in. He was waiting. That meeting was one that changed my life, both for better and for worse. He told me I had been promoted to VP of Design for the Southwest region. I was going to Los Angeles as soon as I could turn everything over to my second-in-command and finish the projects I had open. I should be able to make the move in less than a month. I had finally climbed to the position I had coveted for so long. Nancy and I could move to Los Angeles, and we could afford to buy a very nice home there subsidized by the company, maybe one on or near the shore with a slip for a boat and a nice-sized sailboat, motorized, of course. After sharing the news with Arthur, making plans with my second-in-command, and summarizing the open projects with provisions for either closing them or transferring them, I found it was way past lunchtime. I sent everyone out to lunch and called home. I wanted to tell Nancy the news. I dialed and waited but got only the answering machine. I didn't leave a message and tried her cell next. That also went directly to voicemail, so I just let it go. She was probably with Jane, as she said. I decided to go home early and try to convince her to go out to dinner to celebrate. This had to be worth a dinner at least. I stopped at the florist and picked up 24 long-stemmed roses, pink, her favorite. I also got a large box of chocolates with nuts, also her favorites. I had the card printed with the message, "We finally got the transfer to our dream location. I love you, Joe." I drove the entire way home humming to myself, a silly grin on my face. I was happy and on top of the world. Finally, things were coming true for us. A new future and a new life waited in Los Angeles. Nancy would change, become my active wife again, and we could begin our new life together, a team, like we had always been before she started to change. I stopped that thought. This was a new day and a new beginning. Nothing could stop us now. I drove into the driveway much faster than usual and almost slammed into the garage door before stopping. I had to calm down. I was almost delirious with happiness. It was all coming up roses. That reminded me to grab the roses from the back seat along with the candy and the card before I went inside. I opened the door, put down my keys, and carried the flowers and candy into the living room, ready to place them on the couch for a surprise later when Nancy got home. I rounded the corner and moved toward the couch, only to stop at the sight in front of me. As I stood paralyzed, I saw Nancy with her blouse open and her skirt pulled up over her waist, sitting on the couch. Between her legs was David Parker, our next-door neighbor and one-time friend. In that sudden burst of clarity that comes during some events, I noticed the room, her position, his position, her panties lying on the floor in front of the couch, and his pants down around his ankles. It was all crystal clear and edged into my memory for all time. Neither of them heard me, so they continued what they were doing. That was Nancy moaning and urging David to keep on doing what he was doing. She had both hands on his head, holding him in place. It was obvious that this was not something new to either of them, as David clearly knew what turned Nancy on. I used to know that quite well. It seems I had been replaced. I stood there another 20 seconds or so before sense returned. I felt the shock and disgust of what I was witnessing replaced by a cold anger. I wanted nothing more than to kill both of them, but that was not my way. That passed, and then I knew what I wanted to do. Still holding the flowers and the candy with the card, I walked into the room, moving around the couch and stopping in front of Nancy. Standing behind the naked David Parker, I kicked him in the bum hard with my foot until he stopped what he was doing and looked over his shoulder. All he said was, "Oh." Nancy's eyes had opened and she met mine, staring back at her. The lust began to fade, and they got wider and wider until I was afraid they were going to pop out of her head. Then she began to shake her head back and forth, saying, "No, no, no," over and over again. She realized her position and began pushing David's head away. At the same time, he was trying to pull back. The result had him sitting on his back in front of me, almost sitting on my shoes. As she stared at me, her eyes now full of tears and her lips trembling with her shame, she was trying to pull her skirt down and close her blouse, neither one easy to do with her hands trying to do both at the same time. I watched, the disgust on my face clear as she looked back up at me, her mouth working and trying to form words. My disgust faded, but only to be replaced by pain at seeing what my world had become. I felt the betrayal, the loss, the anger, and finally the pain. And I knew it was over. I had lost her forever, and there was no way back. I decided to finish this now. I took the 24 long-stemmed roses and pulled them out of the small vase they came in and threw them at her where she sat. I watched as they hit her in the face, falling around her body onto the couch and the floor. The vase followed, hitting the wall behind her. Finally, I took the box of chocolates, opened it, and dumped the chocolates on the floor as well. The card followed, landing on the edge of the couch. Now I understand why you are always too tired to go to dinner with me or to make love with me. I see it now. I turned to David Parker, who was trying to get his pants up and his shoes on. I waited until he straightened up, and then I hit him in the face with all of the anger I felt inside. I was pleased to see the blood spurt from his mouth as he fell down again. I watched as he levered himself up on his arms, and I directed my next comments at him. I don't know how you intend to explain this to your wife after I fill her in on your afternoon activities with my soon-to-be ex-wife, but be prepared to explain it. Now get the hell out of my house before I throw you out. I said no more, but went upstairs to pull down a suitcase and begin packing. I was still furious, but the anger was now fading, and a new feeling, one of deep and racking pain, began to fill me. The loss of all I had believed in was almost too much for me. The long rise from the euphoria of the promotion, and then to the equally long fall to the worst depression of my life, left my legs suddenly shaky. I was almost finished packing when it became so strong that I had to stop. I fell on my knees there on the bedroom floor, and I cried as I hadn't since the day my mother died. I let it come, knowing there was little I could do to stop it. I waited until it had run its course, leaving me empty. I felt her as she put her arms around me, holding me tight with her cheek pressed to the top of my head. She was cooing at me as if I were a baby. "I'm so sorry, Joe, I'm so sorry." That was enough to stop my crying as the anger returned, undaunted. I swallowed once, letting the anger grow until it burned bright again. It pushed the pain down and back, forcing it to release its hold on me. "Take your filthy hands off me and get away from me. You stink of sex and you make me sick." I stood, my legs still shaking but beginning to get stronger, and closed the suitcase. I turned to look around and saw Nancy kneeling there, her own face contorted in shock and covered with tears. Her shoulders were shaking with her sobs, but I no longer cared. I went into the bathroom and grabbed my shaving kit. It had my razor, my toothbrush, and several other odds and ends that I kept for traveling. I took those things, dropped them into a small plastic bag, and walked back out to grab my suitcase. I pushed past Nancy, still standing in the doorway, and threw the bag and the suitcase down the steps, caring little where they landed. I went back in, looked around, picked up one or two small things from my bedside table, and then walked down the steps to find my bags. As I walked out the door, I heard Nancy screaming at me to stop, to come back and talk to her, but I wanted only to be gone from that place. I knew then that my marriage was over, and I think I felt a small breath of relief that it had finally come to this. Everything had been moving this way for the past year, and now it was time to accept that it was finished. All the sniping at me, the avoidance, the disregard for me and my needs, and the total disrespect that I had endured were over. Los Angeles was waiting, and I was going alone. I decided as I drove away that I wouldn't say anything to David's wife. Karen had her own demons to fight, and a useless husband wasn't going to change anything for her. David had his own hell at home to live in, and I wished him and Nancy the best. They deserved each other. I had a new job, a new place to live, and the freedom to enjoy the rest of my new life with someone who would love me for who I was. I never looked back. Let's see the story from Anastasia's perspective. I had been feeling depressed and anxious for some time now. I knew part of it was that Patrick was going to be going to college soon, and I would be alone for most of the day. Then part of it was the beginning of that time in a woman's life before menopause, when she begins to believe that she is no longer young and beautiful and alive to all life has to offer. My world had been Joe and Patrick and the house and the things I could do to make their world a pleasant and safe place for so long now that the fear of losing all that was almost a sickness. Most of all, I was feeling very strange a lot of the time. Nothing I could put my finger on or something I could tell a doctor about. Just a strange feeling that something was wrong. I felt off, not myself, and I was beginning to become worried about it. I hesitated to talk to Joe about it, knowing he would try to get me to go for help somewhere. He was a man, and all he could think was to try to fix things. I didn't want things fixed, I just wanted to be left alone to take care of myself. Nothing needed fixing. He had already talked to me about my unwillingness to go out or do things and the death of our love life, something I had little or no interest in now, but for the life of me, I didn't know why. I used to love making love with my husband, and nothing happened to change that. I just couldn't get up the energy to do it now, but that would change again. Things would run their course, and I would be back the way I was. I just needed time. He wouldn't believe me, but I knew I was neglecting him something awful. He tried to do things for me, asked me to go to dinner or to a play or just out anywhere. I said no. Nothing he suggested raised any interest inside me. I soon got tired of his asking and began to snap back at him and say mean things to him that I later regretted but never apologized for. I finally began to let it go. Just let his pleas slide off my back. I began to ignore my husband and often my son. Later, it got even worse, but by then it was too late for me to change it. I didn't realize it at first, but my decline had begun. I began to let my time at the gym with Patrick slide, since I doubted I would continue once he left. I didn't enjoy it that much anyway, but Patrick loved the way it made him feel, and he wanted that feeling for me. While I enjoyed his enthusiasm, I never got into it the way he did. I began to miss some sessions and then more and more, but it was dumb luck that things happened then. Just after I decided I was going to quit while I stopped wanting to exercise with my son, I did enjoy the attentions of the other men there, not in any way other than to make me feel better about myself. They meant nothing to me in any other way, certainly not in a sexual way. I wasn't even sexually interested in my husband, so it was very unlikely I was going to get aroused by someone else, especially not a stranger. I wasn't interested at all until David Parker began to show up at the gym more and more. David was our next-door neighbor and lived with his wife, Karen. Karen was a recluse, almost an agoraphobic. At first, she used to go out only when absolutely necessary, sometimes to a party, but she much preferred to entertain at her house. When others invited her and David, she refused, and she made no excuse. David tried to get her to get treatment, but she refused to leave the house and made only token attempts to talk to anyone except by phone. That was useless, and she discontinued that at the first opportunity. Since then, she remained housebound. Like most of his friends, I had stopped going to see Karen, bothered by her problems and uncomfortable around her. Not much of a friend was I. David was 15 years older than me and owned a small hardware store in town. When Karen began to stay home and her illness was diagnosed, David decided to sell his store and stay close to home with his wife. He had been with her for over 30 years, and he felt it was his duty to try to help her. He did all he could for her, but she continued to get worse, and finally she refused to leave the house except for a doctor's appointment or some emergency. Those also became rare, and finally she left not at all. We began to talk during our breaks at the gym, and I learned more about him and Karen. I apologized for not visiting Karen more, but he simply said he understood. He told me all of their story, and I found myself feeling sympathy for him. My heart melted at the sadness I saw in him. I wanted to help him, but all I could do was let him talk. I listened and became more and more sorry for him. I wished there were more I could do to help, but I was helpless to change anything for him. I found David to be a charming man, and once I noticed a very well-built man with a good body and a flat stomach. I also have to admit I noticed a nice bulge in the tight gym shorts he wore. I especially noticed that it got bigger after he had spent some time talking to me. That started some thoughts in my head that had been missing for some time. The only real problem with that was that when David was out of my sight, so were those thoughts. My husband didn't cause them to reoccur in the evenings, and they lay dormant until I saw David again at the gym. Those thoughts got me to thinking. The next time David and I were together, watching Patrick work out, I got up my courage and asked him about his love life with Karen. He seemed embarrassed at first, but finally told me that there was no love life anymore. Karen had no interest and refused him whenever he made an attempt. She got angry if he tried now, and called him names if he persisted. He had finally given up, and no longer considered her a wife, except in name only. But he was too much of a man to divorce a sick and needy woman, especially when he had loved her for so long. That night at home, I made my decision. I knew what I could do to help David and at the same time help myself. In my own mind, it was so clear. If only David could arouse those feelings in me, and if David was forced into chastity by a frigid wife, then I could help both of us at the same time. It was so simple. I would offer to have sex with David for his satisfaction as well as mine. Since I couldn't become aroused by my husband and he couldn't satisfy his cravings with his wife, it was a perfect solution to our problems. It was so clear to me at that point in my life, so very simple. At no time did I consider what I was going to do as cheating on my husband. I couldn't get aroused by my husband, so I was not meeting his needs and he couldn't meet mine. So in my own mind, I thought that this way, I could regain my own desires, and maybe they would carry over into my marriage bed. That would be a good thing for Joe, wouldn't it? David could get some satisfaction with my body, and that would be a good thing for him. Hopefully, I was going to get some satisfaction from David, gauging from the way his pants bulged out when he was talking to me. It seemed to me to be a clear win-win situation. With that thought, it was settled. The following day, I went to the gym with Patrick, and David was already there. I watched him work out, admiring his body as it glistened with his sweat. I wanted to reach out and rub those shining wet muscles and feel that bulge in his trunk so badly that I felt things I hadn't felt in months, perhaps even years. I was horny. I was actually getting turned on by watching David's body. God, I knew that I had made the right decision. Once he was through with his workout, I talked to David and told him what I'd decided. He listened, his mouth curved up in a wide smile, and he actually blushed. He was almost comically grateful and said he had wanted to make a move on me for months, but was afraid to do so, fearing it would ruin our friendship. He had some reservations doing this behind Joe's back, but I explained our lack of lovemaking, and he seemed to accept that. Actually, David would have accepted anything I told him just to get into my pants. I understood that. I knew men, and David was all man. We made plans the first time to meet at my house. David would tell Karen he had to go somewhere, drive around the block, park his car, and walk through the back gate and into the house. No one could see him once he entered the yard, and no one would be interested in him anyway. Joe would be at work as usual. Patrick was going to be gone all day on a trip to one of the local colleges with his senior class, so I would be alone. I waited in the kitchen, watching the backyard that morning until I saw him come in, close the gate, and almost run to the back door. I held the door open, and he came in without slowing down. It wasn't until he stopped and turned that he noticed I had on only a robe. I stood there, grinning at him, and when his breathing had slowed, I untied the belt, letting the robe fall open. Underneath, I was naked. He let out a groan, almost a sob, as his eyes roved over my naked body. I admit to being turned on by his admiration, and I pushed the robe from my shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. I stood there, naked and fully exposed to this man who was my neighbor and Joe's friend. I let him devour me with his eyes, feeling no shame and no regret. He waited only seconds before walking over to me, pulling my body against his and pressing his mouth over mine. He was not gentle, and that turned me on even more. I accepted his tongue into my mouth, my own meeting and dueling with his. It did not take long before I heard myself screaming at him to do me harder and harder, and he answered with a growl of pure primal lust. I was almost unconscious from the sheer pleasure. We came down together, both of us spent and sated. I let my legs relax and fall to the floor as David lowered my body back down. I moved back to the bathroom. David watched me go, his own pants lying on the floor beside him. I closed the door and let everything inside begin to seep out of me. Then I cleaned what I could with toilet paper until I felt clean enough to put my clothes back on. I would shower later, but for now I was okay. I walked back out to find David dressed again and sitting at the table, looking cautiously at me. I smiled, walked over to kiss his cheek, and sat down opposite him. "Thank you, David. That was more than I could hope for. You were wonderful, and I enjoyed it very much. I hope this is just the first of many times we can help each other." "No, please, thank you, Nancy. I never expected that to happen. I have never climaxed so hard in my life. You are a wonderful lover, and I agree that this should be only the first of many. Do you think we could do this again tomorrow at the same time?" "I think we can. Patrick will be in school, and we can make it upstairs to the bedroom the next time. This time was too quick, but it was wonderful. I think we can be more comfortable in bed. We can take more time to get to know each other and find ways to make the other happy." That was the beginning of our affair, which continued almost daily until the end of the school year. After that, we were more careful, and the frequency began to decrease until we got together once or twice a week, and sometimes less. David was still a wonderful lover, and I enjoyed our time together. The only problem was that nothing I did carried over into my husband's bed. I still had no desire to make love with him, and I felt nothing I was doing was wrong. I knew that I was not thinking correctly, but I didn't care. I didn't want to give up David, and I didn't want to make love with my husband Joe. As a matter of fact, I got angry at Joe because he couldn't turn me on like David. The one thing I knew was that I didn't love David, and the thought of living with him was not one I would ever entertain. I loved Joe. That was a surprise that I wasn't even aware of until it was too late. But I did know that in my heart, and although it didn't stop me from doing what I was doing with David, it kept me feeling safe, knowing I had the love of my husband Joe to fall back on. Funny that I never doubted that, the thought that I could lose my husband, not even a glimmer on my radar. The summer ended, Patrick went off to college, and Joe continued to work predictable hours, leaving me and David more time to have our sexual liaisons. Things were slowly ending with David, and we both knew it, but we still got together as often as we could. We sometimes just did oral for each other, the effort of full sex not worth our time. I loved the way David did it and often just let him go at me as long as he liked. I would blow him if he asked, but I didn't really enjoy it very much. He seemed content to do me, and I let him. That's what he was doing when Joe walked in and caught us. In retrospect, I remember it like it was just an hour ago. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, my blouse open where David had been fondling my body. He had pushed me back, dropped to his knees, and lifted my skirt up to my waist. I leaned back, enjoying what he was doing, and I let my body respond. The climax was still a ways away. I was just beginning to feel the stirrings of lust when I felt David jerk and pull away. I opened my eyes, and as the lust died, I stared into the eyes of my husband Joe standing there. Now, as I look back on it, certain things remain clear and precise. The first time I looked into his eyes, I saw disgust and anger. Then, as I watched, I saw the anger begin to be replaced with something else. It took a minute, then I recognized it. I had seen it a few times before in my life with Joe. It was pain, pain coupled with sadness. I can't begin to tell you what that felt like, to see that pain and that sadness and to know that I was the cause of it. Nothing in my life hurt as much as that knowledge, not even the loss of my parents when they died in a fiery car crash. That look, the one I saw that day, will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. As bad as that memory was, it was far less than the one that happened a few minutes later. David dressed and ran from the house with only a quick, "I'm so damn sorry." I watched him go, blood dripping down his chin, understanding that for the first time in almost a year, I felt nothing for him. I cared nothing about what might happen to him. As I slowly walked up the steps to find Joe, I don't believe at that point that I understood what had happened and how my life was going to change. I only knew that I had to go to my husband and try to explain. I walked into the bedroom and stopped in total shock. My husband, the man I loved with all my heart, the man who provided a strong, loving home for me and our son, was kneeling on the floor, his head in his hands, sobbing, his heart broken. I almost died myself then. At that instant, all I wanted was for God to take me. Take me then, and let me not have to see what I caused for my husband. My heart broke at what I had done to this man. I went to him, knelt on the floor behind him, and held him in my arms. I held him tight, whispering softly to him that it would be all right, that it would be all right. I had to tell him. I had to let him know. "I'm so sorry, Joe. I'm so sorry." Over and over, holding him and waiting for him to hear me and understand. I wanted only to comfort, to love him as a wife should. He pushed me away. He pushed me back and away as if he couldn't stand my touch. He was angry, and in his anger he said words that still echo inside my head when my eyes close and everything becomes quiet. He said words that caused my world to stop, to change forever. His words, "Take your filthy hands off me and get away from me. You stink of sex and you make me sick." They say when you die, your whole life flashes in front of you. That could well be true because I think a lot inside me died that day. But my whole life didn't flash in front of my eyes, just the things I lost, my life with Joe, my home, the times we spent as a family, the dreams we shared for our future, our plans for our retirement years. All the things I loved and cherished, all those things that we shared together, those are the things that died that day, and part of me died with them. Today, I'm sitting here in a small apartment that I rent from month to month. I could afford better since Joe left me comfortable, but I have no desire for anything better. In front of me are the final divorce papers telling me that my marriage is forever gone. Joe has moved on with his life now in Los Angeles, the place we both dreamed about. It seems like that was forever ago, but actually it was only a year or so. I saw the note after he left that day, those words almost screaming at me at what I was to lose. It was lying on the floor near the scene of my debauchery. So simple, our dream location. I love you, Joe. My apathy and my disinterest have returned, banished for a short time by my betrayal of my husband, then by my losing fight to regain my marriage to Joe. I fought the good fight, but I was hampered by his refusal to talk to me or try to understand what I did. It took some time for me to understand that the why was never important. The facts were, especially to Joe, and what could I really say to him? After all, I did it, and I continued to do it even after my rationalization of trying to restart our love life faded away. It was okay to lie to myself after all, but I couldn't lie to him. Not after what I did to him. Our son Patrick hated what I did, but he eventually forgave me. He is my only connection to what I used to have a life with a man who loved me, and who I loved back with a fierce passion. Why that passion deserted me for a time is still a mystery that I fail to understand. Over and over I search for a reason, any reason, but none comes. But it's too late now anyway, so why dwell on it? My life now is much as it was before Joe ended it. I go nowhere. I do nothing. I think of little else but what I lost. I never see David anymore and don't want to. I sit and think and remember what once was. Mostly I remember my thoughts as I decided to have my affair with David. It was so clear, so simple then. I thought of the good things that could happen. I thought of the pluses and the minuses, the pleasure I wanted and could enjoy. But I never once thought of the consequences of what I was going to do. I never once thought of what could go wrong, what bad things might happen. I thought of everything that I could gain from it, but never once did I think of what I might lose. Thanks for tuning in to today's shocking story of betrayal and heartbreak. What would you do if you discovered your spouse's affair in such a dramatic way? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories of infidelity and its consequences. Until next time.